This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still have trouble sleeping at night. After 14 years as sheriff of Lakeland County, I thought I'd seen it all. Bar fights, domestic disputes, the occasional drug bust. But nothing prepared me for what Lake Crescent was hiding. It started on a foggy morning in October 2018. I was finishing paperwork at my desk when my radio crackled. Roy Simmons, a retired logger who'd been fishing near the northeast shore, was practically hyperventilating. Said he'd found something in the water I needed to see right away. I grabbed my jacket and drove out there, expecting maybe a sunken boat or some illegal dumping. The lake was eerily still that morning, mist hanging over the water like a shroud. Roy was waiting at the small dock, his face ashen. He didn't say much, just pointed to his aluminum fishing boat and mumbled, "It's out there, Sheriff Carson." The whole ride out, my stomach was in knots. Roy kept glancing back at me with this haunted look. When we rounded the rocky outcrop near Devil's Cove, he cut the engine and pointed. There. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Something pale beneath the clear water, maybe 15 feet down. As my eyes adjusted, I realized it was a woman, her body suspended in the water, arms drifting with the gentle current. She looked peaceful, too peaceful, like she was sleeping. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, the words fogging in the cold air. I called it in immediately, requesting dive team support and scene processing. Getting her out was a nightmare. The dive team arrived about an hour later, and I stayed on site the whole time, watching as they carefully brought her to the surface. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair that swirled around her face like ink in water. Her skin had this strange, waxy quality to it, not what you'd expect from a drowning victim. The medical examiner, Dr. Paulson, noted it right away at the scene. "This body hasn't been in the water long," he said, examining her hands. "Maybe a few days at most, but look at the preservation. Something's not right." The victim was identified as Meredith Richardson, 26, a graduate student from the University of Washington. She'd been reported missing 3 weeks earlier while collecting water samples for environmental research. Her car had been found at one of the lake's public access points, and everyone assumed she'd had an accident while working alone. But the autopsy changed everything. Dr. Paulson called me personally, his voice tight. "Andrea, you need to see this now." The morgue always gives me the creeps, but that day was worse. Meredith's body lay on the steel table, her skin almost luminous under the harsh lights. Paulson pointed to marks on her wrists and ankles. "Restraint marks," he said grimly. "She was bound for at least 2 weeks before death. And there's more. She drowned, but not in Lake Crescent." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "The water in her lungs, it has different chemical properties. Higher chlorine content, some other compounds I'm still identifying. Someone drowned her somewhere else, then placed her body in the lake." I remember gripping the edge of the exam table, my knuckles white. "She was murdered." "Without question," Paulson confirmed. "And whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The body was preserved somehow, kept cold, before being placed in the lake." I left the morgue feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. This wasn't just a murder. It was calculated, methodical. The location where Roy found her was only accessible by boat or a difficult hiking trail. The killer knew the lake, knew where to place her body to delay discovery. I'd grown up swimming in Lake Crescent. It had always been a place of childhood memories, of summer cookouts and teenage boat parties. Now it felt tainted, like something malevolent had seeped into its waters. The investigation consumed me. I set up a command center at the station, pinned maps of the lake to the walls, and traced every property owner within a mile of the shoreline. Deputies interviewed locals, checked on vacation homes, looked for security camera footage. Nothing substantial emerged. Then, 2 months later, just before Christmas, it happened again. 2 kayakers discovered a body in an isolated cove on the south shore, wedged between submerged logs. Male, late 30s, with the same waxy preservation as Meredith. We identified him as Travis Webb, a freelance photographer who'd been missing for 7 months. He'd been working on a series about water conservation for a nature magazine. The similarities were undeniable. Restraint marks matching Meredith's, drowned in non-lake water, placed in a location indicating detailed knowledge of the lake's geography. This wasn't opportunistic killing. This was someone with a purpose. I barely slept that night, going over property records again. Something kept nagging at me, a detail I'd missed. Around 3 in the morning, it clicked. A 3-acre parcel with a cabin and large boathouse had been purchased 18 months earlier by a company called Western Horizon LLC. The transaction had seemed normal during our initial review, but looking deeper, I found the company was registered to a Philip Kendrick, 53, who'd moved to the area from Idaho. Background checks showed Kendrick had worked as a water treatment specialist for various companies, but there were concerning gaps in his employment history. Even more suspicious, his property had direct lake access in a secluded cove, equidistant from where both bodies were found. We started surveillance immediately. For 3 days, my deputy Mark Wilkins and I took shifts watching Kendrick's property from a concealed position across the lake. On the 4th day, we observed him carrying equipment from his boat to the boathouse, equipment that looked remarkably similar to water testing gear. That night, I pored over the victims' backgrounds again. Both had been involved in water quality research. Meredith's work specifically focused on detecting trace chemicals that might indicate illegal dumping. It was too much of a coincidence. I secured a search warrant the next morning. We approached by boat and land simultaneously, taking Kendrick by surprise as he worked in his yard. He seemed confused at first, then resigned, like he'd been expecting us all along. "Sheriff Carson," he said quietly as I cuffed him. "I suppose it was only a matter of time." The boathouse was, I still have nightmares about it. From the outside it looked ordinary, weathered wood, sliding doors, boat slip. Inside was a different story. Kendrick had converted it into a sophisticated laboratory and detention area. A sealed room in the back contained restraint points that matched the marks found on our victims. A large tank held water that, according to our preliminary tests, matched what was found in their lungs. Most damning of all, Kendrick's computer contained detailed files on both Meredith and Travis, along with 3 other environmental researchers. He'd been tracking their work, their sampling locations, their methodologies. I interviewed Kendrick myself. I needed to understand why. He sat across from me in the interrogation room, oddly composed for a man facing multiple murder charges. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said, his voice flat. But they wouldn't stop. They kept coming back to the same areas, taking sample after sample. There are things in that water that need to stay hidden. It took 2 more days of interrogation and investigation to uncover the full story. Kendrick had worked for a chemical company that had secretly used remote areas of the lake for illegal waste disposal back in the 90s. He'd received substantial payments to maintain his silence when the company was sold, and its new owners wanted to bury any potential environmental liabilities. His move to Lake Crescent wasn't random. He'd come to monitor the water for evidence of chemicals that could trigger an environmental investigation despite the passage of time. When he discovered Meredith taking samples near one of the disposal sites, he panicked. She was getting close, he told me, his eyes distant. Her equipment was more sophisticated than what was available back then. She would have found it eventually. So he abducted her, held her captive while he interrogated her about her research, then killed her when he confirmed his fears. Travis Webb had stumbled onto the same area months earlier while photographing the lake for his conservation piece. The case broke open wider when we found evidence linking Kendrick to 2 additional disappearances of environmental researchers in Idaho. The FBI joined our investigation, and environmental testing eventually identified several underwater sites containing sealed drums of industrial waste, a legacy of corporate environmental crimes decades earlier. I've never felt the same about Lake Crescent since that October morning. Sometimes I drive out there and just sit, watching the water sparkle in the sunlight. It looks so innocent, so pristine, but I know better now. Water keeps secrets. It's why Kendrick chose it, both for hiding the chemicals and for disposing of his victims. Water dissolves, disperses, conceals, but eventually it gives up what you've tried to hide. Last week, I took my boat out to where we found Meredith. The water was clear enough that I could see all the way to the bottom. Fish swam lazily through the underwater terrain, oblivious to what had happened there. I dropped a single flower into the water and watched it sink slowly out of sight. I don't think I'll ever understand how someone could calculate murder so coldly, preparing victims like specimens. The images from Kendrick's boathouse still flash in my mind. The restraints, the tank, the meticulous notes he kept on his victims' research. It was the work of someone who had lost his humanity long before he took his first life. Kendrick is in prison now, facing multiple life sentences. The chemical company executives are being investigated for conspiracy and environmental crimes. But none of that brings back Meredith or Travis or gives peace to their families. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see Meredith's face beneath the water, serene and ghostly in the lake's embrace. And I wonder what other secrets might be waiting in the depths, biding their time until the water decides to reveal them. Story 2. I'm still not sure I should be writing this down, even after all these years. I've kept it bottled up for so long that sometimes I wonder if I'm starting to forget details, and that scares me even more than the memories themselves. But I need to get this out somewhere, even anonymously. Maybe someone out there has answers. Maybe I'm not alone. My name is James Parker. 22 years ago, I was a police officer with the Detroit PD. My partner, Pete Thompson, and I had been working together for about 7 years by that point. We were both veterans, had our routines down pat, knew the streets, knew the regulars. March 14th, 2002 was supposed to be just another Thursday night shift. Pete picked me up around 10:30 that night. I remember it was unusually warm for March in Detroit. I'd been getting these weird feelings for a couple weeks by then, like someone was watching me. I'd mentioned it to Pete a few times, and he admitted he'd been getting the same sensation. We'd both noticed unmarked cars parked across from our houses on different occasions. When we approached them, they'd drive off. We reported it, but nothing ever came of it. We started our shift at 11. The first hour was quiet, just the usual stuff. We broke up a fight outside a bar on Gratiot, helped a drunk guy find his way home. Typical Thursday night crap. Neither of us mentioned the weird feelings we'd been having. It was like an unspoken agreement not to bring it up while we were on duty. I remember we stopped for coffee around 11:40. Pete was quiet, more quiet than usual. When I asked him what was up, he just shook his head and said, "Something doesn't feel right tonight, Jimmy." Pete never called me Jimmy unless something was seriously bothering him. We did our check-in with dispatch at 11:47. I remember looking at the dashboard clock as we called in. Everything was all clear. We were heading down Michigan Avenue near the old industrial district when Pete suddenly tensed up. "You see that?" he asked, nodding toward the rear view. There was a black sedan about 50 yards behind us. No headlights, just crawling along in the darkness. "Could be nothing," I said, but I didn't believe it. "Third time we've seen that car tonight," Pete said quietly. He was right. I hadn't made the connection until he pointed it out. Pete took a sudden left turn. The sedan followed. He took another left, then a right. The car stayed with us. Neither of us said anything for a minute. Then Pete looked at me and said, "It's connected to the Drayson case, isn't it?" The Drayson case. We weren't supposed to be investigating it anymore. Direct orders from Captain Walsh 2 months earlier. Victor Drayson was this big-shot real estate developer with some shady connections. 3 years earlier, 2 witnesses who were going to testify against him in a fraud case disappeared. The official investigation went nowhere, but Pete and I had been quietly looking into it on our own time. We'd found some connections to a shell company that didn't make sense, and a warehouse property that kept showing up in the paperwork. "Maybe we should call it in," I suggested, though I knew we wouldn't. Calling in meant explaining why someone might be following us, which meant admitting we were still working the Drayson case. Pete shook his head. "Let's see where this goes." He accelerated suddenly, taking a hard right down Jefferson Avenue. The sedan fell back, but didn't lose us. I don't know exactly when things started to get weird. We were heading toward the riverfront, away from our patrol area. The sedan was still behind us, keeping its distance now. The radio crackled with static. I tried to call dispatch, but got nothing but interference. "Radio's out," I said. Pete nodded, but didn't seem surprised. "GPS too," he said, tapping the screen on our dash. It was flashing in and out, showing us in completely different locations each time it refreshed. "What the hell?" I muttered. I checked my cell phone. No service. We drove in silence for maybe 10 minutes. The buildings around us became more dilapidated, abandoned factories and warehouses looming on either side of the street. I realized we were heading toward that warehouse I'd found in the Drayson paperwork. "Pete, are you taking us to the Maxwell Street warehouse?" I asked. He glanced at me, his face pale in the dashboard lights. "I thought you were guiding us there." A chill ran down my spine. I haven't said anything about where to go. Pete's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Then why the hell do I feel like something's pulling us there? The sedan behind us had vanished, but now I noticed another vehicle up ahead, parked at an intersection. As we got closer, I could see it was an old station wagon, probably from the 80s. 2 figures sat inside, perfectly still. As we passed, both figures turned their heads in perfect unison to watch us. I couldn't make out their faces, just dark shapes, but I felt their eyes on me like a physical weight. "You see that?" I whispered. Pete nodded. "There's another one." There was a second vehicle up ahead, a van this time. Same thing. 2 motionless figures who turned to watch us pass. Then a third car, a fourth, all positioned at intersections, all with those same watching figures. "They're hurting us," Pete said quietly. By midnight, we were deep in the industrial district. The buildings here had been abandoned for decades. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, chain-link fences topped with rusted barbed wire. And at every intersection, another vehicle with those watching figures. The dashboard clock hit 12:28 when we turned into an empty lot surrounded by the skeletal remains of what had once been a factory. Our headlights illuminated cracked concrete, weeds pushing through the fissures, rusted machinery parts scattered like the bones of giant creatures. "Why did you stop here?" I asked Pete. "I didn't," he said, his voice barely audible. "It stopped itself." The engine was still running, but when Pete tried to put the car in reverse, nothing happened. The wheel wouldn't turn either. That's when we saw them. Two figures standing at the edge of our headlights' reach. They were tall, impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, wearing what looked like long coats that reached the ground. They didn't move, just stood there, watching. "Call for backup," Pete said, reaching for his service weapon. I tried the radio again. Nothing but static, but within that static, I thought I heard voices, whispers, words I couldn't quite make out. "We need to get out of here," I said, drawing my own weapon. Pete nodded. "On 3, 1, 2. We never got to 3. Because that's when both figures raised their arms in perfect unison, extending them toward us, and something shifted. I felt it in my bones, in my teeth, in the spaces between my thoughts, like reality itself was bending. The next thing I knew, I was opening the car door, not in panic, not running away, just calmly opening it. Pete was doing the same thing. I tried to stop myself, tried to scream, but my body wasn't listening to me anymore. It was like I was a passenger in my own skin. We both got out of the car and walked to the front. Without speaking, without any conscious decision, we both removed our service weapons, our badges, our utility belts, and placed them carefully on the hood of the patrol car. The figures were closer now, though I hadn't seen them move. I could almost make out their faces, but my eyes kept sliding away, unable to focus on their features. It was like trying to look directly at the sun. Pete reached into the car and turned off the dash camera. I remember thinking how strange it was that it had been running all this time when everything else electronic was malfunctioning. "They found us," Pete whispered, scribbling something in his notebook before dropping it on the driver's seat. The figures were right in front of us now. Up close, their coats weren't coats at all, but something else. Something that moved and shifted like it was alive. And their faces. God, their faces. I still see them in my nightmares. Not human, not anything that should exist in this world. Eyes like empty wells that somehow still burned. Mouths that opened wider than any jaw should allow. One of them spoke, not with a voice, but directly into my mind. Words that weren't words. Concepts my brain tried desperately to translate into something I could understand. "You have seen," it said, though "said" isn't the right word. "You have found the door." The other one extended what I think was supposed to be a hand. Long, jointed in too many places, tapering to points that weren't quite fingers. "Come," it said into my thoughts. "Show us what you know." I felt blood trickling from my nose, from my ears. Pete was bleeding too. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but my body still wasn't mine to control. We walked toward them, out of the headlights' reach, into the darkness beyond. What happened next? I still can't fully remember. Flashes of places that couldn't exist. A room with walls that breathed. A corridor that never ended. Voices asking questions about the Drayson case, about what we'd found, about the warehouse. But not just asking, pulling the information directly from my mind, sifting through my memories like someone flipping through a filing cabinet. I remember them showing me things, future events, crimes that hadn't happened yet, disasters, warnings, too much for my mind to hold on to. They said we'd crossed a threshold when we started investigating Drayson that we'd glimpsed behind the curtain and couldn't be allowed to remember what we'd seen. The next clear memory I have is waking up in a hospital room 3 months later in Seattle, 3,000 miles from Detroit, with no identification, no memory of how I got there, and surgical scars I couldn't explain. Pete wasn't with me. I've spent 22 years looking for him, for answers. The FBI interviewed me for weeks. I told them everything I could remember, which wasn't much at first. More came back over time, in dreams, in flashes. They classified everything I told them. The Detroit PD had already declared us both dead. My wife had held a funeral. My kids had mourned me. Going back wasn't an option. Whoever or whatever those things were, they had connections, influence. The feds gave me a new identity, a new life. I read about the metal container they found years later, with the letters predicting future crimes. Those were our letters, Pete's and mine, written in our handwriting but not by us, by them, using what they pulled from our minds, mixed with what they knew was coming. Some doors should remain closed. That's what the note said that came with Pete's disassembled gun. I understand now. We got too close to something that exists in the spaces between what we think of as reality. Something that's been here all along, watching, waiting, using people like Drayson to achieve goals I still can't comprehend. I'm still looking for Pete. Sometimes I think I catch glimpses of him across a crowded street or on a passing bus, but it's never him. And sometimes, late at night, I feel them watching me again, waiting for me to cross another threshold, waiting to find me again. Story 3. I still can't sleep through the night. It's been almost 3 months since we came back to the cabin, and I jump at every creak and groan of the house settling. My wife Mia says I need to talk about it, get it out somehow, so here goes. Last year, Mia and I bought this old hunter's cabin deep in the Appalachian woods, about 40 minutes outside of Elkins, West Virginia. We both grew up in these mountains and always dreamed of having our own little piece of wilderness. When we found this place, completely off-grid, surrounded by pines and oaks, with a little creek running nearby, we knew it was perfect despite being seriously run down. The previous owner, some guy named Harlan, had gone missing about 5 years back. Local gossip said he went hunting one November morning and never returned. Search parties combed these woods for weeks, but found nothing. No body, no blood trail, nothing. His family eventually sold the property for dirt cheap, just to be done with it. We spent almost every weekend fixing the place up. New roof, reinforced the foundation, installed solar panels, dug a new well. Mia designed this beautiful kitchen with reclaimed wood countertops. By early spring, we were finally ready to move in full-time. I'd been working remotely as a software developer, and Mia's jewelry business was doing well online, so we didn't need to be in town. The first few months were everything we'd hoped for. Peaceful mornings with coffee on the porch, watching deer graze in the clearing, working with the windows open, hearing nothing but birds and wind through the trees. At night, more stars than you could possibly count. No traffic, no neighbors, no noise pollution. The only real inconvenience was the bathroom situation. The original cabin had this old outhouse about 30 yards from the main building. We'd renovated it with a composting toilet system, but it was still separate from the house. Not ideal at night, but we had plans to add an indoor bathroom eventually. Everything changed on June 12th. I remember the date because it was our 4-month anniversary of living in the cabin full-time. It was around 11:30 at night. Mia had already gone to bed, and I'd stayed up late finishing some code for a client. Before turning in, I needed to use the bathroom. I grabbed the flashlight we kept by the door and headed out to the outhouse. The moon was barely a sliver that night, making the forest unusually dark. I was about halfway to the outhouse when I got this weird feeling. You know that sensation when you suddenly realize you're being watched? The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I quickly turned, sweeping the flashlight beam around the yard. Nothing. Just an animal, I told myself. We'd seen plenty of deer, raccoons, even the occasional black bear, but something felt different this time. I hurried to the outhouse, went inside, and latched the flimsy door. While sitting there, I heard something moving outside. At first, I thought it was just branches rustling in the wind, but there wasn't any wind that night. The air was completely still. Then I heard it clearly. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the outhouse. Not an animal, definitely human. My heart started hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I held my breath, hoping whoever it was would just go away. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Complete silence followed for what felt like forever. Then the doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to open the door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm, but my voice cracked. "Someone there?" No response. Just another rattle of the doorknob, harder this time. I wasn't about to sit there helplessly. I grabbed the flashlight tight in my hand, ready to use it as a weapon if needed, and yanked. The door opened quickly, hoping to catch whoever it was off guard. There was nobody there. I shone the flashlight in every direction, but couldn't see anyone. The yard between the outhouse and our cabin looked empty, but with all the shadows and trees, someone could easily be hiding just out of sight. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever moved in my life, not looking back, just focused on getting to our cabin. I fumbled with the door handle, finally got inside, and slammed it shut behind me, locking both deadbolts. "Dave, what's wrong?" Mia was standing in our bedroom doorway, phone in hand, looking scared. "I was just about to call you. I heard something outside." "Someone's out there," I gasped, still trying to catch my breath. "Someone was at the outhouse, trying to get in while I was inside." Mia's face went white. "I woke up because I heard footsteps on the porch." That's when we heard it, a soft tapping sound. Someone was knocking on our window. We both froze. Our cabin only had one room plus the kitchen area, with windows on all sides. Slowly, we turned toward the sound. There was a face pressed against the glass of our east-facing window. A man's face, illuminated dimly by the light from inside our cabin. He was grinning. Not a normal smile, but a wide, unnatural grin that showed too many teeth. There was a fresh cut on his lower lip that had bled down his chin. He just stood there, hands cupped around his eyes, staring in at us with that horrible grin. He was wearing dark clothes and had this wild, matted hair. I couldn't tell his age, somewhere between 30 and 50 maybe. I reacted on instinct, grabbing my hunting rifle from the closet. With shaking hands, I loaded it while Mia called 911 on her cell. Reception was spotty out here, but she managed to get through. I approached the window and pointed the rifle directly at the man, expecting him to run. He didn't. Instead, his grin got even wider. He winked at me, actually winked, then calmly turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. "He's leaving," I told Mia, who was frantically giving our location to the 911 operator. "But stay on the line. He might come back." We turned on every light in the cabin and waited. I stood guard by the door with my rifle while Mia stayed on the phone. Every few minutes, I'd peek through the curtains, scanning the yard with a spotlight, but saw nothing. It took the sheriff's deputy 45 minutes to reach us. By then, I was convinced the man was gone, but the deputy insisted on searching the property anyway. What they found chilled me to the bone. About 90 feet from our cabin, hidden in a dense thicket of rhododendron, was a small campsite. A sleeping bag, some food wrappers, a water bottle, even a notebook. Based on the condition of the site and the food remains, the deputy estimated someone had been camping there for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. This person had been watching us for 2 whole weeks without us noticing. The notebook was the worst part. It contained detailed notes about our daily routines. When we woke up, when we went to bed, when we left the property, what windows we left open. There were crude drawings of our cabin layout and observations like female showers at 7:15 a.m. and male often alone Tuesday afternoons when female goes to town. The deputy called for backup, and they searched the surrounding woods until dawn, but found no trace of the man. They took the notebook and other items as evidence and told us they'd increase patrols in the area, but honestly, what could they do? We were miles from any neighbor, and the police station was almost an hour away. We stayed with Mia's parents in town for the next week. I installed security cameras, motion sensor lights, and better locks before we even considered going back. The police never found the guy. They ran the fingerprints from the campsite items, but got no matches in their system. After 2 weeks in town, we decided to return to our cabin. We'd put too much work into it to abandon it, we told ourselves. Besides, what were the chances he'd come back now that we knew about him and had security measures in place? That was 2.5 months ago. We've been living here since then, trying to finish the renovations, trying to reclaim our dream home. But it's not the same. I still wake up in the middle of the night, certain I've heard footsteps outside. Every time the security lights trigger, I grab my rifle before checking the cameras. We built that indoor bathroom as our first priority, so neither of us would have to go outside at night again. Mia says she's fine during the day, but I've noticed she doesn't go outside alone anymore. She started looking at real estate listings on her laptop when she thinks I'm not paying attention. The worst part isn't the fear that he might come back. It's knowing that for 2 weeks, someone watched our every move. He saw our most private moments. He knew our routines better than we did. He could have done anything to us at any time, but instead, he just watched. Until that night when he decided to let us know he was there. Sometimes I wonder if he was Harlan, the missing hunter who used to own this place. Maybe he never left these woods at all. Other times I think about that notebook, those detailed observations, and wonder if he's still out there, watching us even now, waiting for us to let our guard down. We're talking about selling the cabin. Neither of us wants to admit defeat, but this place doesn't feel like our dream home anymore. It feels tainted. Sometimes at night, I still see that face at the window, that unnatural grin, that wink, like he was sharing some private joke with me. I don't think I'll ever understand why he revealed himself that night when he could have just kept watching us undetected. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he wanted to see the fear in our eyes. Or maybe he just wanted us to know that these woods, this cabin, never really belonged to us at all. Story 4. I don't usually post personal stuff online, but I need to get this out somewhere. I've been driving trucks for 14 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Crazy drivers, bad weather, the works. But what happened last November changed everything. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. It was a foggy morning in eastern Oregon, just past 5 in the morning. The kind of fog that sits heavy on the road, where your headlights just bounce back at you. I was hauling electronics from Seattle to Boise, a route I'd done dozens of times. When I saw the signs for the DOT way station, I did what I always do, slowed down and pulled in. Nothing unusual about that. The place looked like any other inspection station. Concrete building, scales, a few lights cutting through the fog. No other trucks were there, but that wasn't weird given the early hour. I pulled onto the scale and watched the numbers on the display through my side mirror. That's when things got strange. The readout showed my truck weight, 73,450 pounds, which was normal for my load. But below it was another number. Additional weight, 847 pounds. I'd never seen that before. I figured maybe it was some new DOT regulation I hadn't heard about, or maybe the scale was malfunctioning. I parked in the inspection area and grabbed my logbook. The office looked empty, but the lights were on inside. I expected to find some bored inspector half asleep at the desk, but nobody was there. Just a computer screen glowing in the corner. What really freaked me out was what was on that screen. It showed all my truck info, my license plate, DOT number, company name, everything correct. But beneath that was a table with categories I've never seen at any weigh station. Personal memories, 214 lbs. Emotional attachments, 193 lbs. Regrets and guilt, 298 lbs. Unfulfilled dreams, 142 lbs. Total psychological weight, 847 lbs. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My first thought was that someone was playing a joke, but nobody knew I'd be stopping here. I don't even plan these stops. I just pull in when I see the signs. Driver Sullivan, we've been expecting you. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A man in a DOT uniform was standing behind me. I hadn't heard him come in. He looked normal enough, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven, standard uniform. But his eyes, they were too bright, like they were reflecting more light than they should. "How do you know my name?" I asked. My ID badge was in my pocket, not visible. "We know all our drivers, Mr. Sullivan." He smiled, but it didn't reach those weird eyes, particularly ones carrying as much excess weight as you are. "My load is within legal limits," I said automatically. "Your cargo weight is acceptable. It's your psychological weight that concerns us." He gestured to the screen. 847 pounds of unauthorized emotional baggage. That's quite the violation. I laughed nervously. "Look, I don't know what kind of joke this is. This is no joke, Mr. Sullivan. The Department of Transportation now monitors all types of dangerous cargo." He tapped the screen, including the kind people carry inside them. He walked over to a filing cabinet, opened a drawer, and pulled out what looked like my file, but it couldn't have been. It was too thick, and nobody keeps paper files anymore. "Jake Sullivan, 42 years old, divorced 3 years ago from Sarah, whom you still love. Estranged from your daughter Melissa, who's now 15. You blame yourself for your father's death because you weren't there when he had his heart attack. You dream of buying a farm in Montana, but never pursued it. And you were responsible for an accident in 2008 that left a family injured, though you were legally cleared." My blood ran cold. I'd never told anyone about the accident. Not even. Sarah knew all the details. How could this guy know? "Who the hell are you?" My voice came out shakier than I wanted. "I'm Officer Mercer, Psychological Cargo Division." He closed the file. "You're carrying too much weight, Mr. Sullivan. It's affecting your driving performance whether you realize it or not. Our sensors detected increased risk patterns in your braking and lane control." "That's impossible. I'm one of the safest drivers in my company." "On the surface, perhaps." He pointed to the numbers again. "But this weight slows your reactions by 0.73 seconds. In an emergency, that could be fatal." I wanted to walk out, but something kept me rooted there. Fear, curiosity, or something else I couldn't name. "What exactly do you want from me?" I asked. "You need to unload this excess psychological weight before continuing your journey. There's a facility 3 miles down the access road. We'll need you to check in there for processing." "Processing? Listen, I'm on a schedule. I need to be in Boise by noon." Officer Mercer smiled again. "The process takes less than an hour. You'll be back on the road before 7, feeling much lighter." I'd had enough. "Thanks, but I'm good. If my truck weight is legal, I'm heading out." I turned to leave, half expecting him to try to stop me. He didn't. He just said, "That's your choice, Mr. Sullivan, but I should warn you that carriers of excessive psychological weight often find mechanical difficulties when attempting to leave without clearance." I ignored him and walked back to my truck. The fog had gotten thicker, and I could barely see the office from my driver's door. I climbed in, started the engine, and put it in gear. The truck wouldn't move. The engine was running fine, but when I gave it gas, nothing happened, like I was stuck in mud. I checked everything: transmission, brakes, tire pressure readout, all normal. I even got out and looked under the truck. Nothing wrong that I could see. I tried for maybe 20 minutes before walking back to the office, furious. Officer Mercer was sitting at the desk like he'd been waiting patiently the whole time. "What did you do to my truck?" I demanded. "We haven't done anything to your vehicle, Mr. Sullivan. The weight you're carrying is simply too much for efficient operation. Once you've been processed, you'll find everything works normally again." I considered my options. I could call my dispatcher, but what would I say? That a weigh station was measuring my emotional baggage? That some guy with weird eyes knew my deepest secrets? They'd think I was on drugs. "Fine," I said finally. "Where's this facility?" Officer Mercer gave me directions to what he called the psychological cargo facility. He said I could walk there or he could call a shuttle. I chose to walk, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. The access road was old asphalt, cracked and patched. The fog was so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. After about half an hour of walking, I saw a low concrete building emerge from the mist. No signs, no markings, just a metal door with a small intercom panel. I pressed the button, and the door opened automatically. Inside was a clean, white reception area that looked more like a medical clinic than anything related to trucking. A woman in a gray uniform smiled at me from behind a desk. "Mr. Sullivan, welcome. We've been expecting you. Please fill out these forms." She handed me a tablet with what looked like standard medical forms: name, date of birth, emergency contacts. But then it got weird, asking me to rate my emotional attachment to various memories and relationships on a scale of 1 to 10. I almost walked out then, should have walked out, but I kept thinking about my truck sitting useless at the weigh station and my delivery deadline and how I'd explain this to my boss. After I finished the forms, the woman led me down a hallway to a room that looked like a cross between a medical exam room and a high-tech spa. There was something like a dentist's chair in the middle, surrounded by equipment I didn't recognize. "Please remove your shoes, jacket, and any metal items, then have a seat," she said. "Dr. Keene will be with you shortly." I did as she asked, feeling increasingly uneasy. A few minutes later, a tall man in a white lab coat came in. He had the same two bright eyes as Officer Mercer. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Dr. Keene. I understand you're carrying quite a bit of excess psychological weight today. Look, can we just get this over with? I need to get back on the road." "Of course. The process is quite simple. We'll help you unload the heaviest items first. Your father's death, for instance. That's nearly 100 pounds right there. He had me lie back in the chair and placed what looked like a metal crown on my head. It had wires running to one of the machines. This might feel unusual, but it's completely safe, he said, flipping some switches. What happened next is hard to describe. I felt a pulling sensation, like something was being drawn out through the top of my head. Then suddenly, I was reliving the day I got the call about my dad's heart attack. Every detail was crystal clear. Where I was standing, what I was wearing, even the smell of diesel on my hands. But as I watched the memory play out, something changed. The crushing guilt I'd carried for 14 years just faded. Not gone completely, but distant, like it had happened to someone else. Before I could process what was happening, Dr. Keene moved on. Now let's address your attachment to Sarah, still quite heavy after 3 years. Again, that pulling sensation. Memories of my ex-wife flooded in. Our wedding day, fights, making up, the day she told me she wanted a divorce. But as I watched, the pain dulled. The love I still felt for her became muted, like a TV with the volume turned down. This continued for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Each significant, emotional weight identified, pulled forward, and somehow lessened. My dreams of owning land in Montana, the accident that had haunted me for years, my regrets about being an absent father to Melissa. When Dr. Keene finally removed the crown, I felt physically lighter, like I could float off the chair. But something else felt wrong, very wrong. There was a hollowness inside me, an emptiness where those emotions had been. The procedure was successful, Dr. Keene said, checking a monitor. Your psychological weight is now within acceptable parameters. You may experience some disorientation, but that will pass within 24 to 48 hours. They gave me a bottle of water and led me to a recovery room where I sat staring at the wall for maybe 30 minutes. I didn't feel bad, exactly, just empty, like someone had scooped out parts of me I didn't know could be removed. A shuttle took me back to the way station. My truck started right up, and the display now showed only the normal weight readings. Officer Mercer gave me a form clearing me to continue my route, and I left without saying a word. I made my delivery on time. I drove back home 2 days later. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but nothing felt right. Food had no taste. Music didn't move me. When my daughter called that weekend, I went through the motions of our conversation, but I felt nothing. No love, no regret, no happiness to hear her voice. 3 months later, Sarah left me. We'd been trying to reconcile, but she said I'd changed, that I wasn't the same man. It's like talking to an empty shell, she told me. I couldn't even feel hurt by her words. I started looking for answers. I drove back to that way station twice, but it was never there. Just an abandoned rest area that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I checked DOT records, maps, even satellite images. Nothing. Then last month at a truck stop in Idaho, I overheard another driver talking about a weird inspection station in Oregon. I joined the conversation and soon found out I wasn't the only one. There were others, at least 7 drivers I've confirmed who had the same experience. Some went through processing like I did. Others refused and were given different options. One guy, a driver named Ray, told me he declined the procedure but couldn't leave. They offered him a deal, recruit other drivers, and they'd give him back some of his emotions. He agreed, and for 3 years, he'd been steering specific drivers to that station when it appeared. That's when I realized something horrifying. In the months since my processing, I'd mentioned that way station to dozens of other drivers, casually, almost unconsciously. If you're heading through eastern Oregon, there's a good inspection station at mile marker 218. Real quick, never a line. I'd been recruiting without knowing it. When I counted, I'd sent at least 47 drivers that way. 2 weeks ago, I took time off and went back to Oregon, determined to find that facility again. I drove back and forth along I-84 for days. On the fourth night, in heavy rain, I saw it. The way station, lit up like nothing had changed. Officer Mercer was waiting for me. "We've been pleased with your recruitment numbers, Mr. Sullivan," he said when I walked in. "You've shown real promise. We'd like to offer you a management position." "What are you people doing?" I demanded. "What is this place?" "We're harvesting, Mr. Sullivan. Emotional energy is quite valuable in certain markets." He offered me a deal, continue recruiting at a higher level, and they'd give me artificial emotional responses that would let me function better in society. When I refused, his demeanor changed. "That's unfortunate. The alternative position is less autonomous." I ran, got to my truck, and somehow managed to drive away before they could stop me. As I sped off, I saw something that still gives me nightmares. A line of people washing trucks in the back lot. They moved mechanically, robotically. Their faces were blank, eyes empty. I recognized one of them, a driver I'd known for years who had disappeared 6 months ago. I don't know what to do now. I can feel them watching me. Sometimes I catch myself giving directions to that same mile marker without meaning to. I've quit driving, changed my phone number, moved to a different state. But I know they'll find me eventually. If you're a truck driver and you see a way station that shows up where it shouldn't be, especially in fog or bad weather, drive past it. No matter what, just keep driving. Story 5. I've been debating whether to share this for a long time now. It happened back in September 2015, and I still get chills thinking about it. My husband Richard thought I was overreacting at first, but now even he gets uncomfortable when it comes up. We decided to take our kids camping at Twin Lakes in San Isabel National Forest in Colorado. Just a simple family trip. Me, Diane, 40, Richard, 42, and our kids Ethan, 16, and Melissa, 14. We'd been there once before when the kids were little, and remembered it being peaceful and beautiful. Richard had been working insane hours at his engineering firm, and I thought we all needed some time away from screens and schedules. We arrived on Friday afternoon and set up our campsite about 50 yards from the lake shore. It was gorgeous. Tall pines, clear water, mountains in the background, picture perfect. The kids were actually excited, which surprised me since getting teenagers enthusiastic about anything family-related is practically impossible these days. The first weird thing I noticed was around dinner time. We were cooking hot dogs over the fire, and I suddenly realized I couldn't hear any birds. At first I didn't think much of it, but then I noticed there were no insect sounds either. Nothing. Just complete silence except for our voices and the crackling fire. "Is it just me, or is it really quiet?" I asked Richard. He paused for a moment and looked around. "Huh. Yeah, it is. Probably just the time of day or something." But it wasn't just the time of day. I've been camping enough to know there's always some kind of natural background noise. This was different, like someone had pressed mute on the entire forest. We brushed it off and enjoyed our evening, though I kept getting this prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like we were being watched. The kids didn't seem to notice anything, thankfully. They were busy roasting marshmallows and telling stupid jokes. Around 11:30 that night, after the kids had gone to sleep in their tent, Richard and I were sitting by the dying fire when we heard it. This low humming sound. Not like an engine or anything mechanical. More like I don't know, like the sound you'd imagine the northern lights would make if they made noise. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What is that?" I whispered to Richard. "Probably just someone's generator from another campsite," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. The humming lasted for exactly 7 minutes. I know because I checked my watch, and then it stopped as suddenly as it began. The normal forest sounds returned immediately after. Crickets, owls, the rustle of leaves. It was the weirdest thing. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that same sensation of being watched. The next morning, Ethan came running back from the stream where he'd gone to fill our water containers. "Mom, Dad, you have to see this," he said, his face a mixture of confusion and excitement. We followed him to the stream, and that's when we saw them, perfectly arranged stone triangles placed at exact intervals along the bank. They weren't natural formations. Each one was made of 3 stones balanced on their points to form a triangle, and they were spaced exactly, 10 yards apart, extending in a straight line that pointed directly at our campsite. "Did you make these?" Richard asked Ethan. "No way," Ethan said. "They were just here when I came down." We walked along the line of triangles. There were 17 of them in total, each one identical to the others. The precision was unsettling. These weren't something a random hiker would make for fun. They required careful balance and measurement. "Maybe it's some kind of trail marker," I suggested. But even as I said it, I knew that didn't make sense. Richard took photos of them on his phone. "Weird," was all he said, but I could tell he was disturbed too. When we got back to the campsite, Melissa was up and making herself breakfast. "Did you guys see that person?" she asked casually. My stomach dropped. "What person?" "There's someone standing on the other side of the lake," she said, pointing. "They've been there for like 20 minutes, not moving." We all looked where she was pointing. Sure enough, across the lake, maybe half a mile away, was what looked like a tall, thin figure just standing there, completely motionless. It was too far to make out details, but something about the stillness of it made my skin crawl. Richard immediately grabbed his binoculars from the tent. He stared through them for a long moment, his face growing increasingly confused. It's weird. It looks like a person, but..." He trailed off, handing me the binoculars. When I looked, I couldn't quite process what I was seeing. It was definitely person-shaped, but too tall and thin, and it seemed to be wearing something dark that blended with the trees behind it. The most disturbing part was that it didn't move at all, not even the slight movements you'd expect from someone breathing. "I'm going over there," Richard announced suddenly. "What? No!" I protested, but he was already grabbing his day pack. "I'll be fine. It's broad daylight. I just want to see what's going on." Ethan wanted to come too, but Richard insisted he stay with us. I was secretly relieved. No way did I want my son anywhere near whatever that thing was. Richard left, and the waiting was excruciating. Melissa tried to act nonchalant, but I could tell she was scared. Ethan kept staring across the lake with the binoculars. About 20 minutes after Richard left, Ethan suddenly said, "It's gone." I grabbed the binoculars from him. He was right. The figure was no longer there. My heart raced as I scanned the shoreline for any sign of Richard. It was nearly an hour before Richard returned. His face was pale and he was walking fast. "What happened? Did you see anything?" I asked as soon as he was within earshot. "No one was there," he said, his voice strained. "No footprints, no sign anyone had been standing there at all. But..." He unzipped his pack and carefully pulled something out. It was another triangle made of stones, but this one had something in the center. A deer skull, its eye sockets packed with gray clay and what looked like crushed herbs or plants. "I found this exactly where that figure was standing," Richard said. "And before you ask, no, I didn't touch it. I used sticks to pick it up." The kids were fascinated and frightened at the same time. I was just frightened. "I think we should leave," I said quietly to Richard. "It's probably just some local weirdos playing pranks," he replied, but I could tell he didn't believe that. "Let's not ruin the trip. We'll stay one more night and keep an eye out." I reluctantly agreed, mostly because I didn't want to scare the kids more than they already were. We spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, hiking, fishing, playing cards, but none of us ventured far from the campsite, and we all kept glancing across the lake. As night fell, the forest went silent again. No birds, no insects, nothing. We built the fire extra large and sat close together around it. Richard had brought his hunting knife out and kept it visible on his lap. The kids noticed but didn't say anything. At precisely 11:30, I checked my watch. The humming started again. But this time it was different. It was louder, and we could feel it physically, like pulses of pressure against our skin. Most disturbing of all, our electronic devices started to act strangely. My phone, Richard's phone, Ethan's handheld game, and our battery-powered lantern all began to flicker in perfect synchronization with the pulses of the humming. "What the hell?" Richard muttered, staring at his phone as it turned on and off by itself. That's when Melissa pointed up. "Look at the stars." We all looked up and saw something impossible. A perfectly circular area in the night sky where there were no stars, not clouds covering them, not haze, but a complete absence of stars in a circle directly above our campsite. "That's not possible," Richard whispered. His hand tightened around his knife. The humming and the pulses continued for exactly 7 minutes again, and then everything stopped at once. Our devices returned to normal. The empty circle in the stars disappeared, and the forest sounds came back as if someone had flipped a switch. None of us slept that night. We sat around the fire until dawn, not talking much, just watching and listening. The kids dozed off eventually, but Richard and I stayed wide awake, back to back so we could see in all directions. When morning finally came, we immediately started packing to leave. That's when we discovered the most terrifying thing of all. Our campsite was completely surrounded by stone triangles, dozens of them forming a perfect circle around us. There was no way someone could have placed them there during the night without us seeing or hearing them. But what made me actually throw up was what we found pressed into the soil just outside our tents. A crude drawing showing 4 stick figures in the exact positions we had maintained during the night. Melissa curled up by the fire, Ethan leaning against the cooler, Richard and I back to back. Someone, or something, had been watching us all night, close enough to see exactly how we were sitting, and we never noticed them. We threw everything into the car in record time and drove straight to the ranger station. The ranger on duty, Michael Torres, was skeptical but professional. He came back to our campsite with us to investigate. But when we got there, the stone triangles were gone. All of them. The soil drawing was gone too. There was absolutely no evidence of anything unusual except the photos Richard had taken of the first set of triangles by the stream. Ranger Torres clearly thought we were making it up or had some kind of group hallucination. He took our report anyway and said he'd look into it. We later found out that 2 other camping groups reported similar experiences that same weekend. Unexplained silence, strange humming, and stone arrangements that later disappeared. The Forest Service did some tests and found what they called significant electromagnetic abnormalities in the soil around Twin Lakes, but they couldn't explain what caused them. A month later, the ranger contacted us to say they'd placed wildlife cameras in the area and all of them simultaneously malfunctioned at exactly 11:30 p.m. one night. Each camera captured the same final image before going dead, a triangular stone arrangement. It's been years now, and I still don't have any explanation for what happened. The weirdest part? Our electronic devices, the ones that were with us that night, still sometimes turn on by themselves at exactly 11:30 p.m., even when they're switched off or unplugged. Richard's phone did it just last week, and we've replaced that phone 3 times since the camping trip. I don't know what was watching us at Twin Lakes, but I'm certain of one thing. It wasn't human, and it's still out there. Story 6. I still can't sleep properly. It's been 3 weeks since that night on Highway 1, and every time I close my eyes, I see her standing there on the edge of nothing. I've gone back and forth about sharing this, but I need to get it off my chest, and maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I'm a sales rep for a medical equipment company, which means I spent half my life on the road. 3 weeks ago, I was driving back from a conference in Monterey to my home in San Francisco. It was getting late, around 9:30 at night, and I just wanted to get home. I'd driven Highway 1 dozens of times, so even though there was a storm warning, I wasn't too concerned. The coastal fog started rolling in just past Santa Cruz. Anyone who's driven Highway 1 knows how quickly the weather can change. 1 minute you're enjoying ocean views, the next you're in a cloud. This wasn't normal fog, though. This was the thickest I'd ever seen, like driving through a wall of cotton. My visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet at best. I slowed way down, probably doing 25 mph tops. The fog was so dense that my headlights were just bouncing back at me. I couldn't see shit except for the white line at the edge of the road, which was the only thing keeping me from driving straight off the cliff. Because that's the thing about Highway 1. On one side is mountain, on the other is a 300-foot drop to the Pacific. No room for error. I had my window cracked open, and I could hear the waves crashing somewhere far below. The sound was oddly comforting in that sea of white. My GPS was working, thankfully, telling me I had about 45 minutes to go. The radio kept cutting in and out, so I turned it off. It was just me, the fog, and that damn white line. I remember checking the time. It was 10:14. I remember because I was calculating when I'd get home and whether I should stop for coffee. That's when I saw her. At first I thought it was a deer or something, just a shape in the fog. Then my headlights caught her, a woman standing right on that white line, her back to the abyss. I slammed on my brakes, skidding slightly before coming to a stop maybe 15 feet from her. She was wearing a pale blue raincoat, the hood pulled up, but I could see her face, mid-30s maybe, with this intense stare. The coat was absolutely soaked, dripping water onto the asphalt. There was something off about the way she moved as she stepped toward my car. It wasn't quite right, like her joints were slightly out of sync with each other. I rolled down my window thinking she needed help. Maybe her car broke down, though I hadn't passed any vehicles. Before I could speak, she said, "The bridge at Miller's Point has collapsed. 2 cars have already gone over." Her voice was flat, emotionless. I asked her if she was sure, if she'd called 911. She just stared at me and said, "It collapsed 17 minutes ago." The precision of that statement struck me as weird. Not about 15 minutes ago or just a little while ago, but specifically 17 minutes. I asked her how she knew that. What she said next made my blood run cold. "I know because I was the first." November 14th, 1983. I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I thought maybe I'd misheard her. "What did you say?" "The fall takes 4.7 seconds, she continued. as if she hadn't heard me. The water is 46 degrees. Hypothermia sets in after approximately 8 minutes. I felt sick. 1983. That was 40 years ago. I'm not proud to admit it, but my first thought was that I'd picked up a hitchhiker who was seriously mentally ill. But something about her certainty and the fact that she was soaking wet on a foggy but not rainy night made me pause. "Time thins in certain places along this highway," she said, reading my thoughts, "especially in conditions like these." She gestured to the fog around us, which seemed to be getting even thicker, if that was possible. 3/4 of a mile ahead, the road simply ends. You won't see it until it's too late. I glanced at my GPS. It showed Highway 1 continuing uninterrupted all the way to San Francisco. When I looked back up, she had moved closer to my car. Water was dripping from her coat onto my door. "I don't understand," I said. "How can the road just end? There would be warnings, barriers." "Not tonight," she said. "The landslide happened 22 minutes ago. The authorities haven't been notified yet. You need to turn back." I felt cold all over, despite the heater blasting. Part of me wanted to just drive around her and continue, but something in her eyes stopped me. They were knowing, like she'd seen something terrible and was trying to prevent it from happening again. "There's a turnout 50 yards back," she said. "You can make a 3-point turn there. Take Highway 17 instead. It will add 40 minutes to your journey, but you'll arrive." The implication being that if I continued, I wouldn't. She started backing away, fading into the fog. "Wait," I called after her. "Who are you?" But she was gone, vanished into the white. I sat there for a good minute, trying to process what had just happened. My logical brain was telling me to ignore the crazy woman and continue. Highway 1 doesn't just disappear, but another part of me, some primal instinct maybe, was screaming at me to listen. I decided to check out the turnout she mentioned. If nothing else, I could collect my thoughts and maybe call the highway patrol to report a possibly distressed person on the road. I slowly reversed, keeping my eyes peeled for the turnout. Sure enough, about 50 yards back, there was a small gravel area, just big enough for a 3-point turn. As I was executing the turn, my headlights swept across a section of guardrail that looked newer than the rest. Attached to it was a small metal plaque. I parked and got out, using my phone flashlight to read the inscription. "In memory of Catherine Miller, November 14th, 1983. The fog takes, but sometimes it gives back." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I scrambled back to my car, heart pounding. With shaking hands, I tried to Google Catherine Miller Highway 1, but my signal was too weak. I managed to get 1 bar of service a few miles back, enough to search and confirm that yes, Catherine Miller had died when a section of Highway 1 collapsed during heavy fog conditions near Miller's Point in 1983. I took Highway 17 as she'd suggested. It was clear of fog and added about 40 minutes to my drive, but I made it home safely around midnight. I was still shaken, questioning whether I'd actually seen what I thought I'd seen. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. The next morning, I woke up to news alerts on my phone. Overnight, a section of Highway 1 had suffered a catastrophic structural failure due to erosion from the storm. 2 cars had gone over before emergency services could close the road. The location? Exactly where the woman had warned me not to go. I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to make sense of what happened. I drove back down to that spot in daylight last weekend. The plaque is there, just as I remembered it. I asked a local about Catherine Miller, and they confirmed the story. She was the first victim of the 1983 collapse. a young teacher driving home from work. Her body was found washed up on the beach 2 days later. But here's the thing that really gets me. According to the news reports, the recent collapse happened at exactly 10:31 p.m. The woman told me the bridge had collapsed 17 minutes earlier, which would make it 10:14, precisely when I first saw her. I don't know if I encountered a ghost, a time slip, or something else entirely that night. All I know is that Catherine Miller saved my life. Now, whenever I drive Highway 1 and the fog rolls in, I watch that white line at the edge of the road with particular attention, alert for figures emerging from the mist who stand precisely where safety ends and oblivion begins. And sometimes, when the fog is especially thick, I swear I can hear a woman's voice warning me to be careful, that the fog takes, but sometimes, just sometimes, it gives back. Story 7. I've never talked about this publicly before. I don't think I could have. But it's been 15 years since I left Heddleton, and the nightmares won't stop. Maybe writing this down will help. Maybe someone out there has answers. Or maybe I just need someone to believe me. I moved to Heddleton in the summer of 2007 to teach 5th grade at the elementary school. The town was dying, like so many other coal towns in eastern Tennessee. Storefronts on Main Street sat empty. The median age was pushing 60. When I arrived, the limestone valley holding our little town of 1,200 souls seemed peaceful, even beautiful in a forgotten sort of way. Then Carlington Energy showed up in February 2008 with promises of jobs and money. They bought mineral rights to a huge tract of land just outside town and announced plans for hydraulic fracturing. Most folks were thrilled. This was our economic salvation. Town meetings were packed with residents asking when hiring would begin. Only old Jim Radner, who'd worked the coal mines for 40 years, spoke against it. Some things ought to stay buried, he said. We all ignored him. Within weeks, temporary housing sprung up for workers. The diner started staying open 24 hours. For the first time since I'd arrived, there was optimism in Heddleton. I remember walking down Main Street and seeing actual customers inside the shops. It felt like a miracle. I first noticed something was wrong in late March. Lily Connor, a 6-year-old, first grader, kept falling asleep in the library when her class came for story time. Our librarians sent her to see Rebecca Harmon, the school counselor. I was in the teacher's lounge when Rebecca came in looking shaken. "That Connor girl," she said, pouring coffee with trembling hands. She described the most disturbing dreams about people in dark water. I remember asking what was so unusual about that. Kids have nightmares. These weren't normal nightmares, Rebecca said. She described these figures in incredible detail, how their skin looked like wet paper, how their arms and legs were too long, how their eyes reflected the light like an animal's. She said they talked to her without words. They put pictures in her head. Within a week, 5 more children reported similar dreams. All described the same elongated figures in dark water. All mentioned the same wet paper skin. All said these things communicated by putting images directly into their minds. I started noticing changes in the kids, dark circles under their eyes, jumping at small noises, drawing disturbing pictures during art, black scribbles with long-limbed figures rising from them. Then the adults started changing too. It was subtle at first. Parents complained about weird tastes in their tap water, metallic, almost oily. The local pharmacy couldn't keep sleep aids on the shelves. Martin Fletcher, the pharmacist, told me sales were up 400%. People reported nosebleeds, headaches, and vivid nightmares about underground spaces. Sheriff Kincaid told everyone it was mass anxiety about the drilling. The official explanation was that we were all just working ourselves up over nothing. I wanted to believe that. Then Thomas Weaver snapped. Thomas taught high school chemistry and was the most level-headed person I knew. Deputies found him in his bathroom at 3 a.m, smashing through the wall behind his shower with a sledgehammer. He was screaming about voices coming from the drain, about something trying to squeeze through the pipes. They had to tase him to get him to stop. I visited Thomas in the hospital the next day. The man I saw wasn't the colleague I knew. His eyes darted constantly to the sink in his room. He wouldn't drink any water. When a nurse tried to give him medicine in a paper cup, he knocked it away. "They're in the water, Rebecca," he whispered to me. "They've been down there so long in the dark, and now they're curious about us." 3 days later, Jacob Finch disappeared. He was 13, a good kid from a good family. His mother went to wake him for school and found his bed empty, his bedroom window and door still locked from the inside. The only trace was a small puddle of dark liquid on his bedroom floor. Not blood, not water, something else that the lab in Knoxville couldn't identify. Over the next 2 weeks, 4 more people vanished the same way. Each scene had the same unidentifiable fluid left behind. Sheriff Kincaid called in state police. They searched the woods, dragged the lake, questioned everyone. They found nothing. By then, I'd started keeping a journal. Looking back at it now sends chills down my spine. I documented everything, every disappeared person, every strange dream reported by my students, every unusual event. I noted when people began avoiding water, taking shorter showers, buying bottled water even for cooking. I wrote about how the town seemed to collectively hold its breath whenever it rained. On April 27th, Dr. Elaine Carver from the State University Geology Department came to investigate. She explained that the fracking operation had penetrated an unknown aquifer system at depths where liquid water shouldn't exist. The fluid they found there had been isolated from our surface ecosystem for millions of years. "Whatever's in that water," she told a small group of us gathered in the town hall, "has evolved in complete isolation from surface life. The chemical composition is like nothing we've seen before." That night, everything escalated. Night shift workers fled the drilling site in panic. I heard the commotion from my house and walked down to the gas station where people were gathering. Grown men, hardened workers who'd seen everything, stood trembling, refusing to go back. "They came out of the shaft," one man kept repeating. "People-shaped things crawling out of the main shaft." Carlington Energy ordered an emergency shutdown. The next day, specialized teams in hazmat suits arrived to pump concrete into the main shaft. The company cited unstable geological conditions and methane concerns. They paid severance to all workers and cleared out within 48 hours. We thought it might be over then. The disappearances stopped. People started to breathe again, but then the water started behaving strangely. It began with reports of faucets turning on by themselves. Then people heard sounds from their shower drains, not normal pipe noises, but something like whispering. Toilets would flush on their own, and for a split second, the water would look black. I experienced it myself. I woke up one night to the sound of running water. My bathroom sink was on full blast, steam rising from the hot water. I know I hadn't left it running. As I reached to turn it off, I saw something dark moving in the water, just for an instant. I started showering at the school after that, and kept gallon jugs of store-bought water for drinking and cooking. The town became divided between those who acknowledged something was happening and those who insisted it was mass hysteria. Arguments broke out in the grocery store. The town council held emergency meetings that devolved into shouting matches. Carlington Energy stopped returning calls. Then came the November flood. Heavy rains swelled the creek that ran through town into a raging river. Water filled basements and first floors. Emergency services were overwhelmed. I volunteered at the high school gymnasium, which had been converted to a shelter. That's when multiple people reported seeing things moving in the floodwater. Not debris, figures. They looked human until they moved, bending in impossible ways or staying submerged far too long. Mrs. Abernathy, who ran the flower shop, swore something reached for her from a flooded storm drain, an arm too long and too pale with too many joints. Sheriff Kincaid and 2 deputies went to investigate reports of strange activity at the water treatment plant. Their radio transmissions, which someone recorded and shared around town, still haunt me. "There's something moving in the settlement tanks," Kincaid reported, his voice tight. "Multiple figures. They look almost human, but they're not. They're something else. They move wrong." His last transmission sent the town into panic. They can change their shape. They're reaching through spaces they shouldn't fit through. They're not just in the water anymore. They're learning. They're wearing. Then static. None of the 3 officers were ever seen again. I left Heddleton the next morning along with about half the town. I grabbed what I could fit in my car and just drove. I didn't stop until I reached my parents' house 3 states away. The government quarantined Heddleton a week later. They called it an environmental disaster zone and evacuated the remaining residents. Official reports cited groundwater contamination from the drilling operation. No mention of disappearances. No mention of things in the water. 15 years later, Heddleton is still an exclusion zone. Satellite images show abandoned buildings reclaimed by nature. The official story never changed, just an environmental disaster, nothing more. But I keep tabs on the downstream communities. Cases of metallic taste in water, increased reports of sleep disturbances, children drawing pictures of elongated figures rising from bathtubs and sinks. Last month, a first-grade teacher in a town 30 miles downstream from Heddleton contacted me through a mutual colleague. She sent me drawings from 6 different children in her class. Each showed the same thing: thin, stretched figures emerging from water. When she asked one little boy about his drawing, he said something that made my blood freeze. "They're coming to meet us soon. They just needed to learn how we're made first." I don't know what was released from beneath Heddleton. I don't know if it can be stopped. All I know is that I still check every drain in my house before I go to bed. I still won't take baths, only quick showers. And when I hear water running somewhere it shouldn't be, I don't investigate, I run. Sometimes I dream about them too now. They're closer to the surface than ever, and they've learned so much about us. Story 8. I've been meaning to write this down for weeks now. I need to tell someone about what happened to me on Highway 50 last month, even if no one believes me. I don't even know if I believe it myself anymore, but I know what I saw, what I felt. I need to get this out of my system. I was driving back from visiting my sister in Carson City. It was late, around 11 at night, and I'd been on the road for about 4 hours. I should have just powered through and made it home, but my eyelids were getting heavy, and I knew I needed caffeine if I was going to make it the last 90 miles without falling asleep at the wheel. That stretch of Highway 50 is so damn empty. Just miles and miles of nothing but scrubland and darkness. The kind of darkness that swallows your headlights. I hadn't seen another car for at least 40 minutes when I spotted a neon sign flickering in the distance. As I got closer, I could make out the words, Mel's Diner, and underneath, open 24 hours. The sign was buzzing, that electrical hum that old neon makes when it's about to give out. I remember thinking it was weird seeing a diner in the middle of nowhere, but I was desperate for coffee, so I pulled into the gravel lot. My car was the only one there, which should have been my first warning sign. But when you're tired and have tunnel vision on getting caffeine, you don't always think straight. The diner looked like it had been teleported straight from the 1970s. Faded blue paint peeling off the siding, windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years, and a screen door that squeaked so loud when I opened it that it made the hair on my arms stand up. Inside wasn't much better. The fluorescent lights flickered, making that annoying buzzing sound that gives you a headache if you listen to it too long. I sat at the counter on one of those red vinyl stools. They were cracked, with yellow foam poking through. The place smelled like burnt coffee and grease, but under that was something else, something stale and musty, like old books in a basement. I waited for about 2 minutes before a waitress came out from the back. She was thin, maybe in her 50s, with this weird pale complexion like she hadn't seen the sun in years. Her name tag said Beth. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring it before I could answer. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script. "Yeah, thanks," I said. "Place is pretty quiet tonight." She didn't smile, just stared at me with these dull gray eyes. "It's always quiet here." I took a sip of the coffee. It tasted bitter and burnt, like it had been sitting on the hot plate for hours, maybe days, but I was so tired I drank it anyway. "You passing through?" she asked, wiping the counter with a rag that looked dirtier than the surface she was cleaning. "Yeah, heading back to Reno. Just needed a quick pit stop to wake up." She nodded slowly. "That's what they all say." The way she said it made my skin crawl, but I tried to brush it off. I glanced around the diner. The walls were covered with faded photographs of people standing in front of the diner. They all had the same blank expression, like they were posing for mugshots instead of souvenirs. "Been here long?" I asked, trying to make small talk. Beth stopped wiping. "Time works different here. I couldn't tell you exactly." I remember laughing nervously, thinking she was just being weird. "Well, the sign outside says, since 1954, so I guess that's pretty long." She didn't laugh back, just stared at me with those dead eyes. The jukebox in the corner suddenly crackled to life, playing some old 50s song I didn't recognize. The thing was, I hadn't seen anyone put money in it. It just started. I was about to ask Beth about it when the screen door flew open with a bang. A man stumbled in, breathing hard like he'd been running. He was filthy, his clothes torn and stained, his hair matted with sweat and dirt. His eyes were wild, darting around the room until they landed on me. "You need to get out," he said, his voice raw and desperate. "Now, before it's too late." Beth seemed completely unfazed. She just sighed like this was a regular occurrence. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said in that same monotone voice. The man ignored her, lurching toward me. I could smell him now, not just body odor, but something else, something like decay. "Don't drink the coffee," he whispered. "Don't eat the food. This place, it feeds off your fear. Once you realize what's happening, it's already too late." I stood up, knocking over my coffee. It spilled across the counter, but Beth didn't move to clean it up. "Look, buddy, I don't know what your problem is," I started to say. "The highway," he cut me off, his voice cracking. "It won't let you leave. I've been trying for..." I don't even know how long anymore. Days, weeks. Every time I think I'm getting away, I end up right back here. Beth finally moved, coming around the counter. That's enough, Charlie. You're scaring our guest. The man, Charlie, let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Guest? Is that what we're calling them now? Prey is more like it. He turned back to me, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight it left bruises I can still see today. Whatever you do, don't look back once you get on the road. Just drive. And if you start to see the diner in your rearview mirror, no matter how far you've gone, floor it. It's the only chance you have. Before I could respond, he bolted out the door, disappearing into the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I turned to Beth, expecting her to call the cops or at least act shaken up, but she just stood there, watching me with those lifeless eyes. "Sorry about Charlie," she said, no emotion in her voice. "He's been having a rough time accepting his situation." "His situation?" She nodded, picking up a rag to wipe the counter again, deliberately avoiding the spilled coffee. "Some people have trouble understanding that once you enter Mel's, the highway doesn't really let you leave. Not completely." I laughed, but it came out all wrong, high-pitched and nervous. "What are you talking about?" She put down the rag and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. Her eyes seemed different somehow, deeper, older. You ever wonder why a diner would be out here in the middle of nowhere? Why it's still open despite having no customers, no employees coming or going? I didn't answer. I couldn't. "We all started just like you," she continued, "just passing through, needing a break from the road. But the diner, it needs new stories, new faces. Eventually, you become part of it, part of its story." "This is insane," I said, backing toward the door. "I'm leaving." Beth didn't try to stop me. She just smiled sadly. "You can try. They all do." As I reached for the door handle, I glanced out the window and froze. There were people, at least a dozen of them, standing in the parking lot. They hadn't been there when I arrived. I would have noticed. They were just standing there, staring at the diner with hollow eyes. Some of them looked like they'd been outdoors for months, clothes tattered, skin weathered. Others looked fresher, but they all had the same empty expression. "Who are they?" I whispered, unable to look away. "Former customers," Beth said, suddenly right behind me. I hadn't heard her move. "The ones who figured it out too late. The ones who can't quite leave, but aren't ready to stay either. They're stuck in between, always circling back no matter how far they think they've gone." My mouth went dry. This is some kind of sick joke, right? Beth put her hand on my shoulder, and it was ice cold. "They'll be coming in soon. They always do, around this time. If you're going to try and leave, you should do it now." I don't remember pushing through the door. I don't remember running to my car. But I do remember the sound of footsteps behind me, slow and shuffling, getting closer. I remember fumbling with my keys, dropping them, scooping them up with shaking hands. As I finally got the car started, I looked up and saw them all staring at me. They weren't running after me or trying to stop me. They were just watching, like they knew something I didn't. I peeled out of the parking lot, gravel flying. In my rearview mirror, I could see Beth standing in the doorway of the diner, that same sad smile on her face. The others had turned to watch my car, their hollow eyes reflecting my taillights. I drove faster than I ever have in my life. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely keep the wheel straight. Every few minutes, I'd check the rearview mirror, terrified I'd see the diner's neon sign glowing in the distance behind me. About 20 miles down the road, I started to relax a little. I hadn't seen anything following me. and the rational part of my brain was kicking in, telling me it was just some elaborate prank, or maybe I dozed off at the wheel and dreamed the whole thing. Then I saw it, a flicker of neon in my rearview mirror, just for a second, then gone. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The highway stretched out before me, empty and dark. I drove for what felt like hours, never slowing down, constantly checking my mirror. Every time I looked, for just a split second, I thought I could see it. That damn neon sign, flickering in the distance, always behind me, no matter how far or fast I drove. I didn't stop until I reached the outskirts of Reno, when my gas light came on. Even then, I pulled into the busiest gas station I could find, one with lots of people and bright lights. I kept the engine running while I pumped gas, too scared to turn it off. It's been 3 weeks now. I haven't driven on Highway 50 since that night. I take the long way around, adding hours to my commute, but I don't care. Sometimes at night, I still wake up thinking I can hear that jukebox playing faintly in the distance. Sometimes I swear I catch glimpses of Beth or Charlie or those hollow-eyed people in crowds watching me. The worst part is, I know the diner is still out there, waiting. Its neon sign buzzing in the darkness, promising rest to weary travelers. And sometimes, when I'm driving at night and see a diner's lights in the distance, I find myself slowing down, feeling an inexplicable pull to stop, to go inside, to take a seat at the counter. I fight it every time, but I wonder how long I can keep fighting. I wonder if one day I'll end up like Charlie, desperately trying to warn others before it's too late. Or worse, like Beth, accepting my fate, becoming part of the diner's eternal story. If you're ever driving down Highway 50 late at night and see a diner called Mel's with a flickering neon sign, just keep driving. No matter how tired you are, no matter how much you need that coffee, just keep driving. Story 9. I still get chills every time I have to drive at night. 6 months later, and I'm still not over it. I've tried therapy, meditation, even those stupid relaxation apps my sister swears by. Nothing helps. Because how do you process something that shouldn't be possible? How do you explain to people that what happened to you defies logic without sounding completely insane? It was late May, just after my cousin Melissa's wedding in Henderson, Nevada. The ceremony had been beautiful. Outdoor venue with string lights everywhere, perfect weather. I was supposed to stay overnight like everyone else, but I had an important meeting Monday morning that I couldn't reschedule. So around 10 at night, I said my goodbyes, changed into comfortable clothes for the drive, and hit the road back to my apartment in Sacramento. I'm normally not someone who minds driving alone. Actually, I used to love it. Just me, some good music, and the open road. No one to judge my terrible singing or demand control of the playlist. That night, I had my travel mug of coffee, my carefully curated driving playlist, and about 6 hours of road ahead of me. The first hour or so was fine. Traffic thinned out quickly once I got past Las Vegas and onto Highway 95. This stretch of Nevada highway is seriously empty, just darkness, desert, and occasional signs warning about wild horses. The moon was nearly full that night, casting this eerie bluish light across the desert landscape. Beautiful, but in that slightly unsettling way that makes you feel small. Around midnight is when I first noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. Nothing weird about that initially. It's a highway. Cars exist. But after about 20 minutes, I realized something odd. This car was maintaining the exact same distance behind me, not getting closer, not falling back, just there, constant. I'm a cautious driver by nature, so I tend to go slightly over the speed limit, but nothing crazy. When I noticed this car, I sped up a little, going from 70 to about 75 mph. The car behind me did the same. Okay, weird, but not necessarily sinister, right? People unconsciously match speeds sometimes. So I slowed down to 65. The car behind me slowed down too. That's when the first real tingle of unease hit me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just using me as a pace car. Maybe they were tired and focusing on my taillights to stay alert. But something about it felt deliberate, predatory even. For the next 40 minutes, this continued. I'd adjust my speed, they'd match it perfectly, never getting close enough for me to make out details, just those headlights burning in my mirror. I started gripping the steering wheel tighter, checking my mirrors more frequently. My podcast had ended long ago, and I hadn't even noticed. My gas gauge showed I was getting low, not critically, but enough that I started watching for signs. When I spotted one indicating a rest area 3 miles ahead, I decided to pull in, not to stop. There was no way I was stopping now, but to see what this car would do. As I approached the turnoff, I flipped on my blinker, slowed down as if I was going to turn in. At the very last second, I changed my mind and kept going straight. My heart was pounding as I watched my mirror. The car behind me hesitated at the turn, slowed almost to a stop, and then continued straight, following me. That's when I knew for certain I was being followed. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't my imagination. Someone was deliberately tracking my car. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but of course, no service. This stretch of 95 is notorious for being a complete dead zone. No cell towers for miles and miles, just emptiness. I was truly alone out here with whoever was following me. I decided my best option was to try to outrun them. I pushed my foot down on the accelerator, watching as my speedometer climbed, 80, 85, 90. The desert landscape became a blur as I flew down the empty highway, my hands sweating against the steering wheel. For a brief, hopeful moment, the headlights fell, back, growing smaller in my mirror. Relief washed over me. I was getting away. But then, like something out of a nightmare, they surged forward again. Whoever was driving that car had just been toying with me. They could have caught up any time they wanted. It was at that moment, when the headlights grew large in my mirror, that I caught a glimpse of the driver for the first time. The angle was just right, the moonlight illuminating the interior of their vehicle for a split second. All I could make out was a dark silhouette and what looked like a wide-brimmed hat, like some kind of old-fashioned hat, not a baseball cap, the kind that casts shadows over the face. I remember thinking that was strange. Who wears a hat like that while driving at night? The glimpse was so brief, so unclear, yet something about that silhouette made my blood run cold. It didn't look right. The proportions were off somehow. Just as I was trying to process what I'd seen, my car shuddered. The engine made a horrible coughing sound, and warning lights flashed across my dashboard. "No, no, no!" I shouted, pounding the steering wheel. The engine sputtered and then died completely. My car was coasting on momentum alone. I managed to guide my dead car to the shoulder, heart hammering in my chest. In my rearview mirror, I saw the headlights slow and pull over about 50 yards behind me. I was trapped. I frantically searched my car for anything I could use as a weapon. I had nothing, just my phone, a water bottle, and a makeup bag. The tire iron was in the trunk, and there was no way I was getting out of the car to retrieve it. Not with that person approaching. I locked all the doors and slid down in my seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. The headlights behind me went dark. In the silence that followed, I could hear nothing but my own ragged breathing and the occasional ping of my cooling engine. Minutes passed like hours. I kept expecting to see that silhouette appear at my window, but nothing happened. The suspense was almost worse than a direct confrontation. Then came a tap on my window that nearly stopped my heart. I jerked up, a scream caught in my throat, and found myself staring not at the figure in the hat, but at an elderly man in a highway patrol uniform. He was motioning for me to roll down my window, his expression concerned. With shaking hands, I lowered the window just a crack. "Are you alone?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. Highway patrol. Are you all right? You were driving erratically back there." I looked in my rearview mirror. The car that had been following me was gone, completely vanished. There was just the patrol car, its light bar now flashing. "Someone was following me," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "They've been behind me for almost an hour. They pulled over right behind me just a minute ago." The officer's expression grew serious. "Ma'am, I've been behind you for about 5 minutes. Noticed you swerving and speeding. There's been no one else on this road tonight. I'm the only one who followed you." I couldn't process what he was saying. "No, that's impossible. There was a car, with a driver wearing a strange hat. They followed me for miles." The officer looked concerned now, but in that way, people look at you when they think you might be unstable. "Let me take a look at your car," he said gently. "Sounds like you might have been having some car trouble. Could explain the erratic driving." I sat in stunned silence as he checked under my hood. Apparently, a loose connection to my battery was the culprit. He fixed it easily, and my car started right up. "I'm going to follow you to Baker," he said. "It's about 20 miles ahead. You can get a room there for the night if you'd like, or continue on if you're feeling up to it. But I think you should rest." I thanked him, still shaken, still certain of what I'd experienced. He followed me all the way to Baker, just as promised. Before he left, he gave me his card. Officer Jim Bradshaw. I Googled him later. He's real, a 30-year veteran of the Nevada Highway Patrol. I stayed in a motel that night, unable to sleep, replaying everything in my mind. Had I imagined it all? Had I been so tired that I hallucinated an entire car following me? It seemed impossible, yet the officer had been so certain no one else was on the road. When I finally made it home the next day, I started researching that stretch of highway. What I found chilled me to the bone. There are dozens of stories from drivers who experienced something similar, a mysterious vehicle that follows them for miles through the desert night before vanishing. Some local legends say it's the ghost of a highway patrolman who died pursuing a drunk driver back in the 1970s, still patrolling in death. Others claim it's something else, something that uses the isolation of the desert highways to hunt. I don't know what followed me that night. I don't know if it was something supernatural or if I was just exhausted and imagining things. What I do know is that I won't drive that route again, especially not at night. And whenever I see headlights in my rearview mirror now, I can't help but wonder if they truly belong to the vehicle I can see, or if something else is watching me from the darkness. It's been 6 months. I've told almost no one about this because I know how it sounds, but I know what I experienced. And if you're ever driving through Nevada at night and notice headlights maintaining that perfect, unchanging distance behind you, don't pull over, don't stop. Just keep driving until you reach civilization. And whatever you do, don't look too closely at the driver. Story 10. I can't believe it's been 3 years since that day in the Rockies, and I still wake up in cold sweats sometimes. I've tried talking to therapists about it, but they all think it's just trauma, or that we were suffering from altitude sickness or something. But I know what I saw. We all do. It was early June 2020, right after the COVID restrictions started easing up in Colorado. My friends and I had been planning this hiking trip for months. Me, Taylor, Danielle, Miguel, and Jason. We were all experienced hikers who'd done plenty of backcountry trips before. This was supposed to be our big freedom trip after being cooped up for months. The first 2 days were absolutely perfect. The weather was that sweet spot in the Rockies. Warm days, cool nights, wildflowers everywhere. We were hitting about 12 miles a day, taking our time, stopping to swim in streams. Normal stuff. We'd sit around the campfire at night, drinking the whiskey Miguel always brings, talking about how glad we were to finally be outside again. It was on that third day that everything changed. We were eating breakfast when Jason mentioned hearing about this hidden lake from some guy at REI. Supposedly, it was this pristine alpine lake that wasn't on most maps because it was off-trail and hard to get to. Jason had rough directions, basically hiking up this side valley about 4 miles off our planned route. I remember Danielle being hesitant, saying we should stick to our itinerary, but Miguel and Jason were all about exploring. I sided with the guys, thinking about how cool it would be to find a spot tourists never see. Looking back, I wish I'd listened to Danielle. We set off around 9 that morning. The detour started fine, just a faint game trail winding up through a pine forest. But after about an hour, the trail basically disappeared, and we were just navigating by compass and Jason's vague directions. The forest got thicker, darker. I remember noticing how the birds seemed to go quiet the deeper we went. Miguel joked about entering Bigfoot territory, but even his laugh sounded forced. There was just something off. The air felt heavy, almost pressurized, like right before a massive thunderstorm. But the sky was clear. After about 3 hours of brutal uphill hiking, pushing through dense underbrush, we finally broke through to this ridge. And there it was, this perfect oval lake, maybe half a mile across, surrounded by steep mountain walls on 3 sides. The water was this unnatural shade of blue, almost too blue, if that makes sense, like someone had dropped food coloring in it. We all just stood there for a minute, catching our breath and taking it in. It was absolutely gorgeous, but something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. I remember thinking it was too perfect, too untouched, like finding a perfectly made bed in an abandoned house. Jason was the first to start down toward the shore, yelling about how we'd discovered paradise. The rest of us followed. By the time we reached the lake, it was around 2 in the afternoon. The sun was high, and the lake was sparkling. We found a flat area to set up camp near the water's edge. Danielle still seemed uneasy, but she didn't say much. She kept looking around, scanning the tree line across the lake. When I asked her what was wrong, she just shrugged and said, "Nothing. Just feels weird here." I know what she meant. Despite the beautiful surroundings, I felt like we were being watched. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, but whenever I'd turn to look, nothing was there. Just shadows from the trees. We spent the afternoon exploring the shoreline, taking pictures, skipping rocks. Miguel even took a quick swim, though he came out complaining about how cold the water was. "It's like ice," he said, shivering, "like it's never seen the sun." As sunset approached, the mood shifted. The mountains cast long shadows over the lake, and the blue water turned dark, almost black. We made dinner in silence, no one wanting to acknowledge the growing unease. Even Jason, whose usually non-stop chatter, was quiet. We built a fire, but it didn't seem to put out much, heat or light. The flames were low and reddish, not the bright orange you'd expect. The wood hissed and popped more than normal. I remember Miguel saying it was probably just damp wood, but none of us really believed that. As it got dark, the atmosphere around the lake changed completely. The air got colder, not the normal mountain chill, but a bone-deep cold that seemed to come from the lake itself. And the silence. I've been in remote wilderness before, but this was different. No insects buzzing, no night birds, no rustling leaves, just absolute silence, except for the occasional strange splash from somewhere in the middle of the lake. We went to bed early, around 10. No one wanted to stay up talking like we usually did. Jason and Miguel shared one tent, and Danielle and I took the other. I remember lying there, unable to sleep, listening to Danielle's breathing as she finally dozed off. I kept hearing things, faint sounds just at the edge of my hearing, like whispers, but not quite human. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, I was wide awake at what my watch said was 12:17 in the morning. Something had woken me, a sound outside the tent. It was like someone calling my name, but from a great distance. Tyler, soft and drawn out. I lay perfectly still, my heart pounding. Danielle was still asleep beside me. The sound came again, closer this time. Not just my name, but words I couldn't quite make out. Multiple voices, whispering just outside the thin fabric of our tent. I unzipped my sleeping bag as quietly as possible and crawled to the tent entrance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. When I finally opened it a crack and peered out, what I saw made me freeze. Across the lake at the tree line were shapes, human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Tall, too tall and thin, moving between the trees. There must have been 5 or 6 of them. In the moonlight they looked almost translucent, and they were watching our camp. I could feel it. As I stared, one of them stepped fully out of the trees. Its proportions were all wrong, arms too long, legs bent at odd angles, and its face. I couldn't make out features, just hollows where eyes should be. It raised one long arm and pointed directly at me. I scrambled back, knocking into Danielle, who woke with a start. I was so terrified I could barely speak, just kept saying, "We need to go, now, right now." She must have seen the panic in my eyes because she didn't question me. We quickly pulled on shoes and jackets. I grabbed our headlamps and packs while Danielle went to wake the guys. When all 4 of us were outside the tents, I pointed across the lake. The figures were still there, more of them now, standing completely still at the water's edge. Jason whispered, "What the fuck are those?" And Miguel just shook his head, his face pale in the moonlight. We didn't bother breaking down the tents properly. We just grabbed our essentials, stuffed them in our packs, and prepared to leave. That's when we heard it. A loud crash from across the lake, like a tree falling, followed by this horrible laughter. Not joyful laughter. This was high-pitched, almost hysterical, echoing across the water. It didn't sound human. We ran. We didn't even discuss it. Just grabbed our packs and ran back toward the trail, our headlamps bouncing wildly, illuminating patches of forest that seemed to close in around us. The path that had taken us hours to hike up now seemed to twist and change. Landmarks, I remembered, weren't where they should be. It was like the forest itself was shifting. The whispers followed us, getting louder, more frantic. Some sounded like pleas for help, others like threats. I couldn't understand the words, but the intent was clear. They wanted us to stop, to turn around, to come back. We kept running, stumbling over roots and rocks. At one point, Danielle fell hard, cutting her hand on a sharp stone. The moment, her blood hit the ground. Another crash sounded behind us, closer this time, followed by more of that terrible laughter. Miguel helped Danielle up, and we pushed on, our lungs burning, fear driving us forward. The forest seemed endless, the trees growing denser, branches reaching out like hands trying to grab us. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, we finally broke through to the main trail. We didn't slow down until we reached the parking area where we'd left Jason's SUV. We threw our packs in the back and piled in, Jason fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them in the ignition. As we drove away, I looked back through the rear window. In the glow of the taillights, I swear I saw one of those figures standing at the edge of the parking lot, impossibly tall, watching us leave. And then it raised its hand in what almost seemed like a wave. None of us spoke for the first hour of the drive. We were all in shock, trying to process what we'd seen. Finally, Miguel broke the silence asking, "What the hell were those things?" No one had an answer. Jason suggested it might have been other hikers playing a prank, but we all knew that wasn't true. What we saw wasn't human. Danielle thought maybe we'd all hallucinated from some toxic algae in the lake, but that didn't explain how we all saw the same thing. We drove straight through the night, not stopping until we reached Denver. We've all tried to rationalize what happened. I've researched local legends, Native American stories about the area, missing persons cases, anything that might explain what we encountered, but I've found nothing concrete. The four of us have never gone back to the Rockies together. Jason and Miguel still hike occasionally, but they stick to popular trails now. Danielle moved to California last year, saying she needed to be near the ocean, away from mountains. I still go hiking sometimes, but never off trail and never alone. I've tried to forget that night, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever was at that lake let us go, that we were allowed to leave. Sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear those whispers again, calling my name from a great distance, and I wonder if someday something is going to follow us back. Story 11. I've been replaying the events of that night in my head for 2 months now. I still can't sleep properly. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd actually taken that detour, or if I'd stayed at that diner just a few minutes longer. I need to write this down to see if anyone else has experienced something similar, or if anyone knows what the hell is going on out there. It started because I was desperate to get to San Francisco for my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner. I'd missed my connecting flight in Salt Lake City due to weather delays, and I was panicking. My sister would kill me if I missed it. She'd been planning this wedding for over a year, and as her maid of honor, I had responsibilities. So I did something stupid. I rented a car and decided to drive through the night across Nevada. The rental agent gave me a skeptical look when I told him my destination, but I assured him I'd done long drives before. What I didn't mention was that I'd never driven across the desert at night, alone. I left Salt Lake around 8 in the evening, figuring I could make it to San Francisco by early afternoon the next day if I only stopped for gas and coffee. The first few hours were fine. Traffic thinned out as I crossed into Nevada, and by midnight, I was completely alone on Highway 50. I stopped at this tiny gas station in the middle of nowhere around 1:30 in the morning. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. One flickering light over the pumps and a sleepy-looking guy behind the counter inside. I filled up, then went in to pay and grab some coffee. The attendant was an older man, probably in his 60s, with a weathered face and a name tag that read Earl. When I asked how far to the next town, he got this weird look on his face. "You're heading west? On 50? Now?" he asked, checking his watch. I told him yes, I needed to get to San Francisco by tomorrow afternoon. He shook his head slowly. They don't call this the loneliest road in America for nothing, miss. No cell service for the next 120 miles or so. If you break down, you're stuck till morning. I shrugged it off, told him my car was fine, just rented it today. It's not just breakdowns I'd worry about, he muttered, but didn't elaborate. He just handed me my change and said, "Be careful out there. Don't stop for anything unusual, and if your radio starts acting funny, turn it off." I laughed nervously, thinking he was just messing with me, and headed back to my car. As I pulled away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, still watching me from the doorway of the station. Once I was back on the highway, the darkness was complete. No streetlights, no houses, nothing but my headlights cutting through the pitch black. The mountains were just dark shapes against a slightly less dark sky. I couldn't even see stars because of some clouds moving in. I turned on the radio to keep me company, but all I got was static. I kept scanning through stations, hoping to find something, anything to break the silence. Nothing but white noise for about 20 minutes. Then suddenly, the static cleared. The radio stopped scanning on its own and locked onto 91.7 FM. A woman's voice came through, clear as day, professional, like a news anchor. "This is Emergency Broadcast System Operator Sarah Langley. We have reports of a dangerous situation developing at milepost 237 on US Highway 50. If you are receiving this broadcast, please acknowledge by flashing your headlights twice." I hesitated. It seemed weird, but also official sounding. And I was getting close to that milepost according to the markers I'd been passing. Maybe there was an accident ahead or something. I flashed my lights twice, feeling silly doing it when there was nobody around to see. The voice came back immediately. "Thank you for acknowledging. We have confirmed your position via thermal imaging. There is a developing situation ahead that requires you to take a detour. For your safety, please reduce your speed and prepare to turn onto the marked detour route in approximately 5 miles. That's when the first real chill hit me. How did they know I'd flashed my lights? Thermal imaging? Out here? It didn't make sense, and the broadcast seemed to be talking directly to me, not to drivers in general. I was about to turn off the radio when a different voice broke through. A man, sounding desperate and out of breath. "Don't take the detour. It's a trap. They're not—" His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by static, then the woman again. "We apologize for the interruption. Please disregard. Highway Patrol is establishing a safe corridor. The detour is clearly marked with emergency flares. Please follow all posted instructions." My hands were sweating on the steering wheel now. Something felt very, very wrong. I slowed down a bit, scanning the darkness ahead, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't call anyone. No cell service, just like Earl had warned me. Soon I saw the flares in the distance, red lights in a line leading off the highway onto what looked like a dirt road. As I got closer, I saw a large orange detour sign. But what made my blood run cold was what I spotted behind it. At least 3 vehicles pulled off to the side, partially hidden behind the sign. They looked abandoned. The radio spoke again, the woman's voice more insistent now. "Please reduce speed and prepare to exit the highway. This is a mandatory evacuation route." I noticed her voice had changed subtly. The professional tone was slipping, and she sounded almost eager. "Thermal imaging shows you're not slowing down. Turn onto the detour immediately. We have personnel waiting to assist you." That's when I made my decision. I hit the gas hard, speeding past the detour. In my mirrors, I saw movement around those abandoned cars, tall, dark figures emerging from behind them. They weren't wearing any kind of uniform or reflective gear like highway workers would. The radio crackled loudly. The woman's voice was completely different now, angry, harsh. Subject is not complying. Repeat, subject is not complying. Initiate secondary protocol. I switched off the radio, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pushed the rental car as fast as it would go, flying down that empty highway, constantly checking my mirrors to see if I was being followed. After about 10 miles of driving like a maniac, I saw lights ahead, a small town, or what passed for one out there. Just a cluster of buildings, but to me it looked like salvation. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the only place with lights still on. Inside, there were a few people scattered around. 2 truckers at the counter, an older couple in a booth, and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I must have looked as terrified as I felt, because everyone stopped to stare when I burst in. I tried to explain what had happened, stumbling over my words. To my surprise, the waitress and one of the truckers exchanged knowing looks. "You heard it too, huh? That broadcast?" the trucker asked. He was a big guy with a gray beard and tired eyes. "What mile marker did they tell you about?" When I told him milepost 237, he nodded grimly. "It's always different. Last guy who came through here heard 215. Guy before that, it was 242. The waitress poured me a coffee without me asking. "You're lucky you didn't take that detour," she said quietly. 7 people have gone missing on this stretch of highway in the past year. They all reported hearing the same broadcast before they disappeared. The older man from the couple in the booth spoke up. "My nephew works for the state police. They found the abandoned vehicles but no bodies, no evidence of what happened to the drivers. One guy did make it to town after almost taking the detour," the trucker added. "Stayed at the motel next door, reported everything to the police. Next morning his room was empty. Door locked from the inside, window still closed. Never found him." I felt sick. I kept thinking about those dark figures I'd seen moving behind the abandoned cars. "Has anyone investigated the radio station?" I asked. "Tried to find out where the broadcast is coming from?" The waitress shook her head. "There is no station at 91.7 FM out here. The police have checked. Nothing registered, no tower, nothing." That's when my phone rang. We all jumped. I'd forgotten I even had it since it had been useless without service. But now it was ringing, showing unknown caller on the screen. With shaking hands, I answered and put it on speaker. "Hello, Diane." It was her, the same woman from the radio. "We missed you at the detour. We're very disappointed." My blood turned to ice. I had never identified myself during the broadcast. How did she know my name? "Who is this?" I demanded. "What do you want?" "We want to help you, Diane. We always want to help travelers on the lonely road. But now we'll have to do things differently." The line went dead. At the same moment, the lights in the diner flickered and went out. Complete darkness except for the dim emergency exit sign. In the dark, I heard my phone make a noise, the static sound of a radio tuning. Then the same voice came through its speaker, though the phone call had ended. "Second location acquired. Proceeding with extraction of all subjects." The diner's door swung open, but when the emergency lights finally kicked on, there was nothing there, just darkness. No parking lot, no cars, nothing. Just an empty black void where the outside world should have been. We heard them then. Voices that didn't sound human, getting closer, speaking words I couldn't understand. The trucker tried to close the door, but it wouldn't shut. It just kept opening to that impossible darkness. I don't remember much after that. Just fragments. The older couple vanishing into the darkness. The waitress screaming. The trucker trying to barricade the kitchen door. I woke up on the side of Highway 50, miles from where the diner should have been, with the sun rising over the mountains. My rental car was gone. My phone was gone. I had no idea how I'd gotten there. A highway patrol officer found me walking along the shoulder an hour later. When I tried to tell him what happened, he just gave me that look people give to someone they think is crazy or on drugs. They never found the diner. According to the police, there hadn't been a diner at the location I described for at least 15 years. The 4 people I met there were all reported missing that night. Their vehicles found abandoned in various places along Highway 50. I checked the news every day for any mention of them or of other disappearances along that highway. Sometimes I scanned through radio stations late at night, dreading and half expecting to hear that voice again. And sometimes, when my phone rings showing unknown caller, I wonder if I should answer, or if I've already given them everything they needed to find me again. Story 12. I've been driving trucks for 19 years. 19 years on the road, and I've seen pretty much everything you can imagine. Drunk drivers, horrible accidents, weird lights in the sky, hitchhikers that disappear. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened to me last July on I-40 through Arizona. I still get chills thinking about it. I'm only sharing this now because I need to tell someone who might believe me. My wife thinks I was hallucinating from fatigue. My dispatcher suggested I get checked for carbon monoxide poisoning, and the one cop I managed to talk to looked at me like I was high on something. It was July 14th, 2021. I remember the date because it was my daughter's birthday, and I was annoyed about being on the road instead of at home for her party. I was hauling refrigerated goods from Barstow to Albuquerque, a route I've done dozens of times. Nothing special. My truck is a red Peterbilt 579 with custom chrome work I installed myself. Not the newest model, but she's mine, paid off, and I keep her in good shape. I'd been driving since around 4 in the morning. By mid-afternoon, I was just past Kingman, Arizona, with the sun beating down hard. The highway was pretty empty, just how I like it. I had the AC blasting and was listening to a podcast about World War II, feeling good despite missing my kid's birthday. That's when I first noticed it in my mirror. Another red Peterbilt, same model as mine, same color, hanging back maybe 100 yards. Nothing weird about that. There are plenty of red Petes on the road. But something made me keep glancing in my mirror. Maybe it was the way it maintained that exact distance behind me, never getting closer or falling back. After about 20 minutes, I sped up a little, pushing from 65 to 70. The red truck behind me matched my speed exactly. I slowed down to 60. It slowed down too, keeping that precise 100-yard gap. Could have been coincidence, right? Truckers tend to match speeds sometimes. But then I changed lanes to pass a slow-moving RV. The red Peterbilt changed lanes at the exact same moment, mirroring my move perfectly. That's when I started feeling uneasy. I watched it more carefully in my mirrors. Same model, same year from what I could tell. And as it got closer to me during a slight uphill climb, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. It had the exact same chrome package as mine. Not similar, identical, the same custom work I'd done myself. I grabbed my CB radio. Eastbound on I-40, red Pete behind the white RV. You got your ears on? Nothing. I tried again, switching channels. Still nothing. I decided to test something. There was no one around us for at least half a mile in either direction. I hit my brakes, not hard, just enough to drop 5 miles per hour quickly. The red truck behind me braked at the exact same moment. Not a reaction, the same moment. My heart started beating faster. I switched lanes again without signaling. The truck did the same. I sped up to 75. It matched me perfectly. This wasn't normal. No driver has reflexes that good. It was like the truck was connected to mine somehow. That's when I noticed something else in my mirror that made my blood run cold. Along the driver's side of my truck, I have a long scratch with a dent near the fuel tank from where I scraped a concrete barrier in Dallas last year. The red truck behind me had the exact same damage in the exact same spot. I'm not ashamed to admit I was scared now. This wasn't possible. I grabbed my phone and tried to take a picture of the truck in my mirror, but the angle was bad and the image came out blurry. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping with that thing behind me seemed worse somehow. I spotted a sign for a truck stop in Flagstaff, about 40 miles ahead. I decided to head there, somewhere with people, somewhere I could maybe get a better look at this truck and whoever was driving it. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. The red Peterbilt stayed behind me the entire time, maintaining that exact distance, matching every small adjustment in my speed. I tried the CB radio several more times, nothing but static. When I finally pulled into the truck stop in Flagstaff, my hands were shaking so bad I nearly missed the entrance. I parked in the first available spot, not even bothering to back in properly. Through my mirrors, I watched the red truck pull in too, but it went to the far end of the lot, away from the other trucks. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm down. The rational part of my brain was searching for explanations. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe someone had customized their truck to look like mine as some kind of joke. I finally worked up the courage to get out. The blast of hot Arizona air hit me as I climbed down from my cab. I looked across the lot. The red truck was there, about 100 yards away, engine still running. I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, but the glare on the windshield made it impossible to make out details. I walked into the truck stop, planning to grab a coffee and maybe talk to someone about what was happening. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of drivers sitting at tables and a bored-looking cashier scrolling on her phone. I ordered a coffee and then, trying to sound casual, asked the cashier, "Hey, you see that other red Peterbilt that pulled in? Guy parked way at the back of the lot?" She looked at me weird. "What other red truck? Yours is the only red semi in the lot right now." My stomach dropped. "No, there's another one, same as mine. Red Peterbilt, parked way back there." I pointed out the window. She leaned over the counter to look where I was pointing. "Sir, there's nothing there, just empty spaces." I turned to look. The red truck was right there, plain as day, where I'd seen it park. I could still see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. "You don't see that truck, right there?" My voice was rising now. She looked concerned. "Sir, are you feeling okay? There's no truck there." I mumbled something about being tired and took my coffee to a table by the window where I could keep an eye on the red Peterbilt. It was still there. I wasn't crazy. I took out my phone and tried to take a picture. When I looked at the screen, the parking spot in the photo was empty. I looked up from my phone, and I could still see the truck with my naked eyes. I didn't know what to do. Was I hallucinating? Was I having some kind of breakdown? I'd been driving a long time, but I wasn't especially tired. I hadn't been taking any medications. This made no sense. After about 20 minutes of sitting there, staring at a truck no one else could see, I decided I needed to get back on the road. Whatever was happening, I still had a delivery to make. Maybe putting some distance between me and this thing was the best option. I paid for my coffee and walked back to my truck. deliberately taking a route that wouldn't bring me close to the other Peterbilt. As I pulled out of the truck stop, I watched in my mirror. The red truck started its engine and pulled out too. Back on I-40, the truck slipped in behind me again, maintaining that exact same distance. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I called my dispatcher, thinking maybe talking to someone would help. "Hey, Steve, what's up?" Jeff answered. "Jeff, something really weird is happening. There's this truck following me." And then I heard it, an echo on the line, a voice, my voice, repeating my words a half-second later. "Something really weird is happening. There's this truck following me." "What was that?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What was what?" Jeff replied. "That echo. Didn't you hear it?" "No echo on my end, Steve. You're breaking up a bit, though. What's going on?" Before I could answer, my CB radio crackled to life. Through the speaker, I heard my entire phone conversation playing back. Then a voice, almost my voice but slightly off, like hearing yourself on a recording, said, "He can't help you, Steve." I nearly drove off the road. I hung up on Jeff and stared at my CB radio like it was a snake about to bite me. The voice came again. "We've been watching you for a while now, Steve." My mouth was dry as dust. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "You know who I am." I looked in my mirror. The red truck was closer now, maybe 50 yards back. For the first time, I could clearly see the driver. It was me, my face, my gray-streaked beard, my Arizona Diamondbacks cap. But the expression was wrong. It was smiling in a way I never smile, the mouth stretched too wide, the eyes completely dead. "This isn't real," I whispered. The CB crackled again. "I'm as real as you are, maybe more real." Then it said something that made my blood freeze. "Cassie would have loved that necklace you bought her for her birthday. Too bad you're missing her party. Again." I hadn't told anyone about the necklace I'd bought my daughter. It was sitting wrapped in my duffel bag. "How do you know about that?" I demanded. "I know everything you know, Steve. I know about the money you've been hiding from Linda. I know about what happened in Vegas 3 years ago. I know about the pills in your glove compartment." Each word was like a physical blow. These were secrets I'd never told anyone, things only I could know. "What do you want?" I screamed into the CB. "To replace you. You've had your turn. It's mine now." I was shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. Up ahead, I saw signs for a roadside diner. I took the exit without signaling, tires squealing. The red truck followed, matching my every move. I parked haphazardly in front of the diner and ran inside, nearly knocking over an elderly couple on their way out. Through the window, I watched the red Peterbilt park across the street, engine idling. I grabbed my phone and called 911, huddling in a corner booth. 911, what's your emergency?" "There's someone following me. They've been following me for hours. They're across the street right now." My voice was shaking. "Sir, what is your location?" I realized I didn't even know the name of the place. I looked around frantically. "Some diner off I-40, east of Flagstaff. I don't know the name. Please, you need to send someone now." "Can you describe the vehicle following you?" "It's a red Peterbilt 579, exactly like mine. The driver looks like me." There was a pause. "Sir, have you been drinking or taking any substances today?" "No, I'm a commercial driver. I'm completely sober. Please just send someone. They're right across the street." "Sir, remain calm. We'll dispatch an officer to your location. Can you describe any landmarks?" I gave them what details I could. The call ended with a promise that someone would be there soon. I ordered a coffee I didn't want and kept my eyes fixed on the red truck across the street. The figure in the driver's seat hadn't moved. It just sat there, watching me. After about 20 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up. I watched as the officer got out and looked around, then walked over to where the red Peterbilt was parked. But he walked right past it, like it wasn't even there. He came into the diner and spoke to the waitress, who pointed at me. "Sir, did you call about someone following you?" the officer asked, approaching my table. "Yes, they're right there." I pointed across the street. "The red truck." The officer looked where I was pointing. "Sir, there's no red truck there, just an empty lot." "It's right there. How can you not see it?" The officer's expression changed from professional concern to suspicion. "Sir, how long have you been driving today? Are you taking any medications?" I knew how it looked. I knew I sounded crazy. But the truck was right there. The officer suggested I take a break from driving and get some rest. He offered to call someone for me, but I declined. After he left, I sat in the diner for another hour, watching the red truck. It never moved. The figure inside never moved, just watching me. When I finally worked up the courage to leave, I walked to my truck with my keys clutched in my hand like a weapon. I looked across the street. The red Peterbilt was gone. I completed my delivery in Albuquerque without further incident. No sign of the truck on the rest of my drive. I've been telling myself it was exhaustion or stress or maybe something I ate. But deep down, I know what I saw. It's been almost a year now, and I haven't seen the truck again. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and I look in my mirror, I think I see headlights that match my speed exactly. And sometimes, when I use my CB radio, I hear a faint echo of my own voice, just a split second after I speak. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know what it wanted. But I know it's still out there somewhere. And I know that somewhere on the interstate, there's someone or something with my face, driving a truck identical to mine, waiting for another chance to find me. Story 13. I still can't explain what happened to me 3 nights ago. I've barely slept since then. Every time I close my eyes, I see those lights in the darkness. I hear the scratching above my head. I feel the same suffocating fear. I'm a doctor at Pinecrest Regional. I've been working there for 6 years now, mostly night shifts in the ER. I've seen some truly horrible things, car crashes, gunshot wounds, overdoses, but nothing has ever shaken me like what happened in that tunnel. I was driving back from a medical conference in Denver last Wednesday. It had run late, and I was already cutting it close for my midnight shift. I hate being late. The main highway had some construction that would have added another 40 minutes to my drive, so I decided to take the old mountain pass through Black Ridge Tunnel. I've driven it before during daylight, but never at night. It's this long, straight shot, 3.7 miles through the mountain, and it would save me almost an hour. It was around 11:30 when I approached the tunnel entrance. I remember checking my watch and thinking I'd make it to my shift with a few minutes to spare. The road leading up to Black Ridge was deserted, just my headlights cutting through the darkness and the stars overhead. It was actually kind of peaceful. I don't remember seeing any barricades or closure signs. I swear to God the entrance looked completely normal. Just this big dark mouth in the side of the mountain. As soon as I entered, my radio cut out mid-song, just static. I didn't think much of it. Mountain tunnels always mess with the signal. But then I noticed how dark it was in there, like unnaturally dark. My headlights seemed to just stop a few feet in front of my car. They weren't illuminating the tunnel walls like they should have been. It was as if the darkness was thicker somehow, absorbing the light. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter and telling myself not to be stupid. It's just a tunnel. I've driven through it before. but something felt off right from the start. About half a mile in, I started noticing these weird points of light in the distance. At first, I thought it was just reflectors on the tunnel walls, or maybe the exit far ahead. But they were moving, weaving back and forth across the road. They didn't look like headlights, more like floating orbs of pale blue light. I slowed down a bit, trying to figure out what I was seeing. The lights seemed to split and merge again, moving in patterns that didn't make any sense. They weren't following the curve of the road. It was like they were dancing. Then, without warning, they just vanished. I remember laughing nervously to myself, thinking it must have been a reflection of something, or maybe I was just tired from the conference. But then I heard it, a dull thump on the roof of my car. At first, I thought maybe something had fallen from the tunnel ceiling, a piece of loose rock or something. But then I heard another thump, and another, like footsteps, walking across the roof of my car. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard this horrible dragging sound right above my head, slow, deliberate scraping, like nails or claws being dragged across metal. The scratching moved directly above my seat, right above the sunroof. I didn't want to look up. God, I didn't want to look up, but I couldn't help it. Through the glass of my sunroof, pressed against it from the outside, was a hand. Except it wasn't a human hand. The fingers were too long, with too many joints, bending in ways that fingers shouldn't bend. The skin was pale, almost translucent, with visible veins underneath. It was pressing against the glass, like it was testing its strength. I screamed and swerved instinctively. My car scraped hard against the tunnel wall, sending up a shower of sparks. There was a sound like something being dislodged from the roof, a sliding sound, and then nothing. I floored the accelerator, not caring about the speed limit, just wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. The car engine roared in the confined space, the sound echoing off the walls. I was breathing so fast, I was getting lightheaded. That's when I noticed my dashboard clock. It was flashing, like it does when the battery's been disconnected, and when it reset itself, it showed 11:47, the exact time I'd entered the tunnel. I stared at it in disbelief. I'd been in the tunnel for at least 5 minutes, maybe more. In my rearview mirror, I saw them again, the lights, dozens of them now, all moving in that same unnatural way, and they were following me. I pushed the car faster, the engine straining. The scratching had stopped, but something worse was happening. The darkness itself seemed to be thickening around me, pressing in on all sides. My headlights were barely cutting through it now, illuminating maybe 10 feet ahead at most. I remembered reading somewhere, maybe in the local paper, that there had been accidents in this tunnel, people driving too fast, losing control. I grudgingly eased off the accelerator, even though every instinct was screaming at me to go faster. The strangest thing happened when I slowed down. The darkness changed. It's hard to explain, but it became less oppressive somehow. My headlights suddenly penetrated further, and I could see the tunnel walls again. The clock on my dashboard started advancing normally, and there, in the distance, I could see the exit. Just a tiny pinprick of starlight, but it was there. I maintained that slower speed, watching the exit grow larger. The lights behind me were still there, still following, but they seemed to be keeping their distance now. It was like they were escorting me out. When I finally burst out of the tunnel into the night air, I nearly cried with relief. I pulled over immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I looked back at the tunnel entrance, and I swear to God, the lights had stopped right at the threshold. They hovered there for a moment, as if they couldn't or wouldn't cross into the open air. Then they retreated back into the darkness. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, just trying to breathe normally again. I was about to pull back onto the road when a highway patrol car pulled up behind me, lights flashing. The officer approached cautiously, shining his flashlight on me. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked. I must have looked a mess, white as a sheet, covered in sweat. I tried to explain what had happened, probably sounding completely insane. But instead of dismissing me, the officer's face grew serious. "Ma'am, Black Ridge Tunnel has been closed for the past 3 weeks for structural repairs. There are barricades up at both entrances." I started arguing with him, insisting that there had been no barricades, that I had just driven through the tunnel. He asked me to step out of the car. "You're the 3rd person this month to report driving through that tunnel despite the closures," he said quietly. "All of you described similar experiences." That's when he shined his flashlight on the roof of my car. There were deep scratches in the paint, all converging on my sunroof. The glass was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, like something had been pressing down on it with considerable force. The officer told me something else, something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Black Ridge wasn't originally built as a traffic tunnel. It was a mining shaft back in the 50s. In 1957, there was a collapse that trapped 37 miners inside. The company only ever reported 36 workers on their official records. I don't remember much of the drive to the hospital after that. I was late for my shift, but nobody seemed to care once they saw the state I was in. One of the nurses helped clean up a cut on my forehead that I hadn't even noticed. Apparently, I'd hit my head when I swerved in the tunnel. As I was parking in the hospital lot, I noticed my dashboard clock flashing again. When it reset, it read 11:47. I've been taking a different route to work since then, the long way. I don't care if it adds an hour to my commute. I'm never going near Black Ridge again. The scratches are still on my car. I've been meaning to get them fixed, but part of me wants to keep them as proof that I'm not going crazy, that what happened in that tunnel was real. Sometimes I think I see those lights out of the corner of my eye, just for a split second, especially when I'm in a dark room. And last night, I woke up to a scratching sound on my bedroom ceiling. I still don't have an explanation for what happened. Maybe I never will, but I know one thing for certain. Whatever was in that tunnel, it wasn't human, and I think it followed me out. Story 14. I've been trying to make sense of what happened to me 3 weeks ago, but I still can't wrap my head around it. I'm writing this down partly to see if anyone else has experienced something similar on Highway 89, and partly because I'm desperate for someone to believe me. I was driving back from visiting my cousin in Flagstaff. It was a clear July evening, probably around 6 or 7 o'clock. The sun was still up but starting to set, casting this golden light across everything. I decided to take the scenic route home along Highway 89 instead of the interstate. I love that stretch of road, or at least I used to. About an hour into my drive, I noticed something odd just beyond the tree line, what looked like abandoned camping equipment. There were a couple of tents that seemed to have been hastily left behind, and the remains of a campfire that was still smoldering slightly. I remember thinking it was weird, especially since there was no car parked nearby. Who goes camping without a vehicle? And who just abandons their gear like that? I didn't stop. In hindsight, maybe I should have called the park rangers or something, but I just kept driving, figuring maybe they'd just moved to a different spot or were off hiking. About 10 minutes later, I spotted a young woman standing on the side of the road with her thumb out. She was wearing this white sundress that seemed too thin for the cooling evening air. No backpack, no gear, nothing. just standing there. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. Who does these days? But something about her being alone on that road as the sun was setting didn't sit right with me. I couldn't just leave her there. So I pulled over. She got in quickly, thanking me with this weird, rehearsed-sounding gratitude. She introduced herself as Emily and explained she'd gotten separated from her friends while camping. Said they'd gone hiking and she'd fallen behind, then got lost trying to find her way back to their campsite. "They're probably freaking out looking for me," she said with a laugh that didn't quite match the situation. From the moment she got in my car, something felt off. She was perfectly put together for someone who claimed to be lost in the woods. No dirt, no scratches, not even a hair out of place. And her dress was pristine white. Anyone who's spent even an hour hiking knows that's not possible. As we drove, I tried making small talk, asking where she and her friends were from, how long they'd been camping, normal questions. Her answers were vague, like she was making them up on the spot. Sometimes she'd stare out the window for uncomfortably long periods before responding. "Take the next exit," she suddenly said, pointing to an upcoming turnoff I didn't remember from my drive-up. "I thought your campsite was further up the highway," I questioned. "This is a shortcut," she insisted. "I know these roads. It'll get us there faster." Against my better judgment, I took the exit. The road immediately narrowed and started winding through thicker forest. The pavement was old and cracked, with faded lane markings. I'd driven this route many times before, but had never noticed this particular road. The trees seemed to close in around us, blocking out more and more of the fading daylight. My GPS signal started cutting in and out, and then disappeared completely. I remember checking the time. It was just past 8, but it looked much darker outside than it should have been. "How much further?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Not far now," Emily said, still staring out the window. "Just keep driving." About 15 minutes down this increasingly dark and narrow road, my headlights caught something, or someone, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, coming to a stop just a few feet from a man. He looked absolutely terrified, wide eyes, clothes torn, breathing heavily like he'd been running for his life. I rolled down my window. "Hey man, are you okay?" The guy rushed to my window, glancing nervously over his shoulder into the dark forest. "Please, you have to help me," he begged, his voice cracking. "Something's out there. Something's hunting us in the woods." "Us?" I asked. "My friends and I were camping. We heard noises at night. Then they started disappearing one by one. I'm the only one left. Please, you have to get me out of here." I was about to unlock the doors when Emily grabbed my arm. Her hand was ice cold. "Don't," she said firmly. "We shouldn't stop. We need to keep going." The man outside my window looked at Emily, and his face went completely pale. He backed away from the car, shaking his head. "Oh God," he whispered. "You're with her. You're already lost." Before I could say anything else, he turned and ran back into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. "What the hell was that about?" I demanded, turning to Emily. "That guy clearly needs help." "He can't be helped," she said calmly. "Not anymore." The coldness in her voice sent a chill down my spine. I put the car in park and turned to face her. "What's going on here? Who are you really?" Her expression changed then, becoming almost pitying. "This road is cursed, Connor," she said, using my name even though I hadn't told her what it was. "People who wander too far never come back. They become part of it." My heart was pounding in my chest. "How do you know my name?" "I know a lot of things about you," she said. "I know you took this route because you hate the traffic on the interstate." I know you saw our campsite earlier and chose not to stop. I know you're starting to realize what's happening, but it's already too late. I reached for the ignition, planning to turn the car around and get the hell out of there, but Emily just laughed. You can't run from what you can't see, Connor. The road will just bring you back. I ignored her, starting the car and making a U-turn. I drove as fast as I dared on the unfamiliar road, desperate to find my way back to the highway. But after about 10 minutes, I noticed we were passing the same crooked tree I'd seen earlier. Somehow, we'd looped back. I tried again, taking a different turn at a fork in the road. Same result. The road kept changing, shifting, bringing me back to the same spots no matter which direction I chose. My fuel gauge was dropping rapidly, way faster than normal. The digital clock on my dashboard was glitching, sometimes showing midnight, sometimes showing 3 in the morning, even though it couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 at night. Emily just sat there, watching me with this detached curiosity, like I was an insect struggling in a spider's web. The vanishing mile, she finally said. That's what we call it. A stretch of road that appears and disappears. It calls to people, lures them in. Some of us have been wandering it for decades. I don't believe in any of this, I said, even as panic was rising in my throat. This isn't real. Then how do you explain what's happening? She asked. How do you explain me? I didn't have an answer. I just kept driving, desperately looking for a way out. My fuel warning light came on, adding to my growing terror. As the car sputtered, running on fumes, I spotted something through the trees. The campsite I'd seen earlier from the highway. Relief washed over me. If I could reach the highway, I could escape whatever this was. I steered toward it, pushing my dying car as far as it would go. But as we approached, I realized something was wrong. The campfire was blazing much higher than before, and there were people, at least a dozen, standing around it, all perfectly still, all staring in our direction. My car finally gave out about 50 yards from the campsite. As the engine died, Emily turned to me with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. We're home, she said. I got out of the car, planning to run for it, but my legs felt heavy. The air around me seemed to thicken, making each step an enormous effort. Emily walked effortlessly ahead of me toward the group at the campfire. As I struggled forward, I began to make out the faces of the people by the fire. The terrified man from the road was there, no longer afraid but blank-faced and still. Next to him was a woman in hiking gear that looked decades out of date. There was even a park ranger, his uniform tattered and faded. Emily took her place among them, and then they all turned to face me. "Welcome, Connor," they said in perfect unison, their voices overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're one of us now." That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't just a cursed road or a ghostly hitchhiker. This was something much worse. The vanishing mile, Emily had called it. A place that existed outside normal reality, trapping people who ventured too close. I tried running back to my car, but the forest had already swallowed it. When I turned around again, the campsite had moved closer, though I hadn't seen it happen. The people, if they were people, were still watching me, their eyes reflecting the firelight in a way that wasn't quite human. I've been here ever since. Time doesn't work normally. Sometimes it feels like I've been here for years, other times just minutes. The others mostly ignore me now. They wander the woods, occasionally gathering at the campfire. Sometimes new people arrive, confused and frightened like I was. During what I think are daylight hours, I can sometimes see Highway 89 through the trees, tantalizingly close. I've tried to reach it countless times, but the forest always loops me back to the campsite. I've tried calling out to passing cars, but no one seems to hear me. The worst part is when Emily asks me to join her by the roadside. "Your turn to bring someone new," she says. I've refused so far, but I can feel my resolve weakening. The loneliness, the hopelessness, it eats away at you. I'm writing this in the dirt with a stick, pretending someone might read it someday. I don't know if I'll ever escape the vanishing mile. I don't know if anyone ever has. All I know is that if you're driving on Highway 89 and you see a hitchhiker or an abandoned campsite just off the road, don't stop. Don't slow down. Just drive and don't look back. Because we're always watching, always waiting for the next traveler to join us in our endless wandering. Story 15. I never thought I'd be the person sharing one of these weird encounters online, but I've kept this to myself for almost a year now, and I need to tell someone who might believe me. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened that night on Interstate 476, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. It was last October, and I was driving back from my sister's wedding in Pittsburgh. The ceremony had been beautiful, but the reception went on forever. I didn't want to stay overnight since I had an important meeting the next morning, so I decided to make the drive back to Philly, even though it meant traveling through the night. My GPS said I'd be home by 4 in the morning, which would give me just enough time to shower and change before heading to work. The drive was actually pretty peaceful. Traffic was non-existent, and I had my playlist going to keep me alert. I remember feeling tired around 2 a.m., so I pulled into a rest stop, grabbed a coffee, and splashed some water on my face. That seemed to do the trick, and I got back on the road feeling more awake. As I approached the Mid-County Toll Plaza on I-476 outside Philadelphia, I noticed something odd. The entire plaza was practically deserted, which I guess makes sense at that hour, but it still felt eerie. Usually there are at least a few booths open with the automated easy pass lanes running, but that night, it looked like there was only one booth with its light on. I checked my clock as I slowed down. It was exactly 3:17 in the morning. I remember because I calculated I'd be home in about 40 minutes if there wasn't any delay. As I got closer to the toll plaza, I saw a cash-only sign illuminated above the single open booth, Lane 6. This annoyed me because I rarely carry cash, and I'd gotten used to just cruising through with my Easy Pass. Luckily, I had some leftover cash from the wedding in my wallet. I pulled up to the booth and rolled down my window. The cold October air rushed in, making me shiver a little. The toll collector was an older man, probably in his 60s, with deep-set eyes and a worn face. The first thing I noticed was his uniform. It looked outdated, like something from the 80s, with those old-school shoulder patches and a different color scheme than the current PA Turnpike uniforms. But what really caught my attention was this dark stain spread across the front of his shirt. It looked like someone had spilled coffee or something all over him, but he didn't seem bothered by it. I figured maybe he was near the end of his shift and didn't care anymore. "That'll be $2.75, he said in a voice that sounded like he'd smoked his entire life. I dug through my wallet and pulled out a $5 bill, handing it to him. His hands were ice cold when our fingers briefly touched, and I remember thinking it was weird they didn't have better heating in those booths. As he was making change, he said something that didn't register at first. Same price every night since October 17th, 1983. I wasn't really paying attention and just nodded, thinking it was just small talk. But then he continued, and his words made me actually look at him. That was the night Ronald Shepard drove his semi through this booth at 87 miles per hour, he said, his voice completely matter-of-fact. Killed us both instantly. I froze with my hand halfway extended to take my change. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" He gestured to the dark stain across his shirt. Punctured my lungs and crushed my rib cage. Bled out right here in booth 6. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. I glanced at my dashboard clock, 3:19 a.m. For some reason, that detail seemed important to note. The toll collector suddenly became urgent, leaning toward my window. "Listen to me carefully. You need to move over to lane 7 right now." I looked where he was pointing. Lane 7 appeared completely closed. The gate was down and the light was off. "But it's closed," I said, feeling incredibly stupid for even engaging in this conversation. "It happens every year on this night," he continued, ignoring my protest. "Always starts in lane 6, always at 3:21. His eyes locked with mine, and I felt a sense of dread building in my stomach. "You have less than 2 minutes. Move to lane 7 now." I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was the conviction in his voice, or maybe it was the growing sense that something was very wrong about this whole situation. But I took my change, thanked him reflexively, why the hell did I thank him, and drove forward. As soon as I cleared the booth, I swerved my car across the empty toll plaza toward lane 7. Part of me felt absolutely ridiculous. Here I was, swerving across empty lanes because some creepy toll booth operator told me to. I half expected to see police lights in my rearview mirror for the erratic driving. I pulled up to the gate at lane 7 and stopped, not sure what to do since it was clearly closed. I looked back at booth 6, and the collector was still there, watching me intently. He made a frantic waving motion, urging me to go through the gate. "This is insane," I muttered to myself, but I slowly eased my car forward. To my surprise, the gate raised automatically as I approached, allowing me to pass through. Once I was through, I couldn't help but look in my rearview mirror again. That's when I saw it. A massive tractor trailer, its high beams blinding, was barreling down the highway toward the toll plaza at what had to be at least 80 miles per hour. It wasn't slowing down at all. I watched in horror as it plowed directly into booth 6, the exact spot where I had been less than a minute before. The impact was catastrophic. The sound of metal crushing against concrete echoed across the empty highway. The truck's momentum carried it forward, dragging what remained of the booth along with it. Sparks flew as metal scraped against the pavement, and debris scattered across all lanes. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, my heart pounding. I fumbled for my phone to call 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. As I was dialing, I looked back toward the toll plaza. What I saw, or rather, what I didn't see, made me drop my phone into my lap. The toll plaza was completely intact. No truck, no wreckage, no debris. And not just that, all the booths were closed. Not a single light was on. The entire plaza looked like it had been shut down for the night. I sat there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. Had I hallucinated the whole thing? Was I so tired that I was seeing things? But it had felt so real. The sound of the crash was still ringing in my ears. After a few minutes of sitting there in shock, I decided I needed to go back and check. I put my car in drive and slowly made my way back to the toll plaza, pulling onto the shoulder just before the booths. I got out of my car, the cold air hitting me like a slap to the face. The plaza was completely silent except for the distant sound of traffic from I-95. I walked toward booth 6, the one where I'd spoken to the collector, the one I'd watched get demolished by a semi-truck just minutes ago. It was intact, closed up for the night like all the others. But as I got closer, I noticed something on its side. A small bronze plaque that I hadn't seen from my car. I approached it, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight to read what it said. In memory of Edward Collins, 1937-1983, killed in the line of duty, October 17, 1983. My blood ran cold. Below the plaque was a small vase with fresh flowers in it. Fresh flowers. At 3:30 in the morning. Who would put fresh flowers here at this hour? As I stood there trying to make sense of it all, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a traffic alert from the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission app that I had installed but rarely checked. It read, Lane 6 at Mid-County Toll Plaza closed from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. for annual memorial observance. I practically ran back to my car, desperate to get away from that place. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I noticed something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before, a toll receipt. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The date on the receipt read, October 17, 1983, 3:20 a.m. And below that, handwritten in faded blue ink, some debts can never be repaid. Some warnings must be given every year. Thank you for listening. E.C. I don't remember much about the rest of my drive home. I called in sick to work the next day and spent hours researching the Mid-County Toll Plaza. I found an old newspaper article about a tragic accident in 1983, where a truck driver named Ronald Shepard fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into booth 6, killing himself and the toll collector, Edward Collins. It's been almost a year now, and I still don't have any explanation for what happened that night. All I know is that I avoid I-476 during the early morning hours of October 17th, and I always keep cash in my wallet when I'm driving at night, just in case Lane 6 is ever the only one open, with a collector who died over 40 years ago still faithfully reporting for his eternal shift. And the most terrifying part? October 17th is coming up again next week, and I can't stop thinking about it. What happens if someone doesn't listen to Edward's warning? Does the crash happen for real? Or is it just some kind of echo from the past, doomed to repeat itself forever? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. Story 16. I've been driving big rigs for 23 years. I've seen pretty much everything the road can throw at you. Blizzards that turn the highway into a white sheet of nothing. Winds that try to push an 80,000-pound truck off the road like it's made of paper. And every kind of idiot driver you can imagine. But what happened to me last year on I-76 in eastern Colorado, I still can't explain it. This happened in March 2018. I was hauling a load of appliances from Chicago to Denver, which is a regular run for me. I prefer night driving, less traffic, cooler temperatures, and something peaceful about having the road mostly to yourself. I'd left Julesburg and was heading southwest on I-76, probably around mile marker 170 or so. It was about 1:30 in the morning. I always keep my CB radio on channel 19. That's the main channel for truckers. Helps pass the time, gives you a heads up about road conditions, speed traps, that kind of thing. Most nights it's pretty quiet that late. Maybe the occasional chatter between drivers who know each other and are running the same route. That night, the CB crackled to life with two voices I hadn't heard before. Nothing unusual about that. Drivers come and go. One guy called himself Sidewinder. The other was Coyote. Normal trucker handles. Hey Coyote, you seeing this construction up ahead at 165? They got it narrowed down to one lane. Yeah, Sidewinder. Been this way for weeks now. They're taking their sweet time with that bridge repair. I perked up because I'd just passed through that area a couple weeks before, and there hadn't been any construction. In fact, I was pretty sure they'd finished that bridge work back in the fall. I grabbed my mic. This is Midnight Hauler. What construction you boys talking about? I came through here too. Weeks ago, and it was all clear. No response. They just kept talking. Supposed to finish by April, but you know how that goes, Sidewinder said with a laugh. Yeah, add 6 months to any estimate, Coyote replied. I tried again. Sidewinder, Coyote, you copy me? This is Midnight Hauler. Nothing. They kept chatting like they couldn't hear me at all. I figured maybe my transmitter was busted, so I tried calling out to any other trucks in the area. Still nothing. The two of them kept talking about road conditions, weather forecasts, and other normal trucker stuff. But something felt off. They mentioned a bad storm coming in from the west that would hit by morning, but my weather app showed clear skies for the next few days. They talked about diesel prices at a station in Sterling being $2.79 a gallon. I'd just filled up there earlier and paid $3.45. Their conversation went on for maybe 15 minutes, then faded out. I thought that was the end of it until about 20 minutes later when the CB crackled again. Hey Coyote, you seeing this construction up ahead at 165? They got it narrowed down to 1 lane. The exact same words, the exact same tone. Then Coyote responded exactly the same way he had before. Word for word, the entire conversation repeated itself. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I'm not someone who scares easily, but this was beyond weird. I checked my watch when the conversation ended the second time. 23 minutes later, it started again. Identical, down to the pauses and the coughs. By this point, I'd reached the area they were talking about, mile marker 165, no construction, not even signs of recent work, just open highway. I pulled into the next rest area and shut down for a while, feeling seriously unsettled. I got back on the road around 4 in the morning. The voices had stopped. I convinced myself it was some kind of prank, maybe some local kids who'd gotten hold of a CB and were messing with truckers, or maybe someone had recorded a conversation and was playing it on a loop. That had to be it. I delivered my load in Denver later that morning and picked up a backhaul heading east. 2 days later, I was in Big Springs, Nebraska, at a truck stop filling up before heading back to Chicago. I was chatting with the clerk, an older guy named Marv, who'd worked there for years. Just making small talk, I mentioned the weird CB conversation I'd heard. Marv's face changed. Where exactly did you hear this? I-76, around mile marker 165. He nodded slowly. You're not the first driver to mention that. Been happening for a couple years now. What do you mean? Marv looked around like he was making sure no one else was listening. Those voices you heard, that would be Jake Morrison and Eddie Valdez. They were regulars through here. Good guys. Jake was Sidewinder. Eddie was Coyote. The way he said "were" made my stomach tighten. They died in February 2016, head-on collision with a car that crossed the median, right at mile marker 165. I felt cold all over. You're kidding me. Wish I was. That construction they're talking about, it was happening when they died, finished later that year. He paused. They were on the CB with each other right up until it happened. Jake was eastbound, Eddie westbound, passing each other. The car lost control on some black ice, hit Jake's truck. He jackknifed across the median and hit Eddie coming the other way. I didn't sleep well that night in my sleeper. I kept thinking about those voices on the radio, repeating the same conversation over and over. 2 dead men talking about road conditions from 2 years ago. 3 weeks later, my route took me back through eastern Colorado on I-76. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't anxious about it. Part of me wanted to take a different route, but a bigger part needed to know if what I'd heard was real. As I approached mile marker 170, I turned the CB to channel 19 and waited. Nothing at first, just static. Then, at 1:27 a.m., the same time as before, the radio crackled. "Hey Coyote, you seeing this construction up ahead at 165? They got it narrowed down to one lane." There they were. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warm cab. This time, I listened more carefully. Behind their voices, I could hear things I hadn't noticed before. The sound of wind howling across the mic, the creak of metal, and something else. Something that sounded like my own engine. When the conversation looped for the second time, I decided to try something. Right when there was a pause, I grabbed my mic. "Jake, Eddie, this is Tom Bradley. I know what happened to you guys. It was February 16th, 2016, right here at mile marker 165. The regular conversation stopped mid-sentence. Dead silence on the radio for a good 30 seconds. Then, "Who's that? Who's out there?" The voice sounded different now, confused, maybe even frightened. "My name's Tom. I'm a driver like you. I know about the accident." Another long pause. Then, How do you know our names? Nobody uses our real names on the channel. Marv at the Big Springs truck stop told me. He said you were regulars there." "Big Springs? Yeah, good coffee there." The voice, Jake's voice, sounded distant, confused. "What accident are you talking about?" "The one that happened right here, 2 years ago." Silence again. Then the other voice, Eddie, spoke up. "Something's not right. Jake, I got a bad feeling. There's ice on the road. I see it. Getting slick out here." Jake's voice had changed. He sounded alarmed now. "Watch out for that car," Eddie suddenly shouted. What followed was the most horrifying 30 seconds I've ever experienced. I heard tires screaming, Jake yelling, "I can't hold it." The sound of metal tearing, glass shattering. Eddie's voice, "Oh God, he's coming across the..." Then an impact so loud it made me jump in my seat, followed by more crushing metal, and then silence. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I pulled over at the next rest area and sat there for hours, unable to sleep, unable to even close my eyes without hearing those sounds again. When I got home, I researched everything I could find about Jake Morrison and Eddie Valdez. There were news articles about the accident, obituaries, even a short piece in a trucking magazine about highway safety that mentioned them. Both had families. Jake had 3 kids. Eddie was planning to retire that year. I also found an online forum for truckers where others had shared similar experiences on that same stretch of road. Some had just heard the looped conversation. A few had experienced what I did, the accident playing out in real time. One driver claimed that after hearing them, he nearly had an accident himself at the same spot when he dozed off. Another said he heard them warn him about ice on the road, ice that wasn't visible but caused a car to spin out in front of him. 6 months later, my route took me through that area again. I'd been avoiding it, taking longer routes if necessary, but this time there was no way around it. As I approached mile marker 170, I felt my heart racing. I turned to channel 19 and waited. Nothing happened at first. I passed mile marker 165 without hearing a word. I thought maybe it was over, whatever it was. Then, clear as day, a single voice came through the static. "Thanks for listening, Tom. We've been trying to warn people for so long. Maybe now we can rest." It was Jake. He'd never used my name before. The radio went dead after that. Nothing but normal trucker chatter for the rest of my trip. I've been through that stretch of I-76 at least a dozen times since then. I've never heard Jake or Eddie again. Neither have any of the other drivers who used to report the phenomenon, according to that forum I follow. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if I helped two lost souls find peace or if I just experienced something that science can't explain yet. What I do know is that I always slow down at mile marker 165, no matter what the conditions are. And I always keep my CB tuned to channel 19, just in case someone else needs to be heard. Story 17. I still can't shake what happened to me last month on Route 66. It's been weeks, but every time I close my eyes, I see those things. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but after what happened, I don't know what to believe anymore. I was on a solo road trip heading west on Route 66. I've always loved driving, something about the open road and the freedom that comes with it. This was supposed to be my chance to clear my head after a rough year. My job had been stressing me out, and I'd just gone through a bad breakup. I figured some time alone with nothing but the highway ahead would do me good. It was late August, around 7 in the evening. I'd been driving for about 9 hours straight that day, stopping only for gas and quick bathroom breaks. My eyes were getting heavy, and I knew I needed to rest before continuing. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky with these deep oranges and purples. Beautiful, but also a reminder that I needed to find a place to stop soon. I spotted a sign for a rest area about 2 miles ahead. Perfect timing. The rest stop wasn't marked on my GPS, which was weird, but I figured it was just an older one that hadn't been updated in the system. As I pulled off the highway, I noticed how isolated this place was. Just a small gravel parking lot with a single bathroom building, a couple of picnic tables, and trees surrounding it on 3 sides. There was only one other car there, an old blue pickup truck that had definitely seen better days. I parked a few spaces away, stretched my legs, and checked my phone. No service, of course. That's when I noticed the sky had darkened considerably. Storm clouds were rolling in fast, and the wind was picking up. Great. Just what I needed. I grabbed my jacket from the back seat and headed toward the bathroom building. That's when I saw him. An older man with a weathered face and a gray beard sitting at one of the picnic tables. He was just staring at me. Not in a threatening way, but with this intense look of concern that made me uncomfortable. As I walked past him toward the bathrooms, he called out to me. "You shouldn't stay here long," he said. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in a while. I stopped, not sure if I should engage or just keep walking. "Excuse me? This place, it ain't safe after dark." He glanced around nervously, then back at me. "Especially not with that storm coming." I forced a smile, trying to be polite, but also wanting to get away from this strange interaction. "Thanks for the heads up. I'm just taking a quick break before getting back on the road." He shook his head. That's what they all say, but some never leave. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm evening air. "What do you mean by that?" The old man stood up slowly, wincing like his joints were giving him trouble. "About 15 years ago, a bunch of people went missing from this very spot. 5 of them in 1 month. They found one of their cars still parked right here, keys in the ignition, belongings inside. The others, no trace at all." I glanced back at my car, suddenly feeling the urge to get back in it and drive away. But my bladder was screaming at me, and I really needed that break. "What happened to them?" I asked, against my better judgment. "Official reports said they wandered off into the woods and got lost, but locals know better." He lowered his voice. "They found something out there, something they weren't supposed to see." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and I jumped slightly. The old man didn't seem to notice. "Look, I appreciate the warning, but I really need to use the bathroom. I'll be quick and get back on the road, I said, already backing away toward the building. He nodded. Do what you gotta do, but don't linger, son, and whatever you do, stay out of those woods. I hurried to the bathroom, my heart racing a bit faster than it should have been. The inside was what you'd expect from a remote rest stop, dirty, smelly, and poorly lit. I did my business as quickly as possible, trying to ignore the strange scratching sounds coming from somewhere in the walls. Probably just rodents, I told myself. When I came back outside, the old man and his truck were gone. The sky was almost completely dark now, and fat raindrops had started to fall. I jogged back to my car, planning to drive until I found the next town with a motel. That's when I heard it, a woman's scream coming from the edge of the woods. I froze, keys in hand, unsure of what to do. It could be someone in trouble, or it could be nothing, or it could be something else, something related to what the old man had warned me about. The logical part of my brain told me to get in my car and leave, but then I heard it again, a desperate cry for help. Is someone there? I called out, immediately regretting it. The rain was coming down harder now, and lightning flashed across the sky. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the bushes at the edge of the woods rustled, and a woman stumbled out. She was soaking wet, her clothes torn and muddy. Her eyes were wide with terror. Help me, she gasped, running toward me. Please, we have to go. They're coming. Who's coming? Are you hurt? I asked, instinctively moving toward her. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. No time. We need to leave now. That's when I heard it, a low guttural growl coming from the trees where she had emerged. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded wrong, like something trying to mimic an animal sound but not quite getting it right. The woman, who later told me her name was Claire, looked back at the woods, then at me with pure panic in her eyes. Please, she whispered. I didn't need to be told twice. We both ran to my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. The growling sound was getting closer, and I swear I could see movement among the trees, not like something walking, but like the shadows themselves were shifting and stretching toward us. I finally got the key in and started the car. The headlights flickered on, illuminating the area in front of us, and for a split second, I saw them. Dark, hunched figures at the edge of the woods, with eyes that reflected the light in an eerie greenish glow. Not like animal eyes, more like, I don't even know how to describe it. They weren't solid. They seemed to waver like heat mirages, but in the shape of people, or what used to be people. Claire screamed beside me, and I slammed the car into reverse, then drive, and peeled out of that rest stop so fast I'm surprised I didn't wreck. The tires skidded on the wet gravel before finding purchase, and we shot back onto Route 66. We drove in terrified silence for about a minute before Claire spoke. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I was going to die out there. I glanced at her, trying to keep my eyes on the road as rain pounded the windshield. What happened to you? Who were you running from? She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. She was shivering. I turned up the heat. I stopped at that rest area about 3 hours ago, she said. My car broke down about a quarter-mile back, and I was trying to walk to find help. I saw the rest stop and thought there might be a phone or someone who could help. She paused, swallowing hard. There was an old man there. He warned me not to go into the woods, but I thought I saw lights through the trees, like maybe there was a house or a gas station just on the other side. I thought I could cut through and find help. That matched what the old man had told me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. At first, everything was normal. But then I started noticing things, like the birds had stopped singing, and it felt like I was being watched. Then I saw them, these shadow things moving between the trees. They had these eyes. She trailed off, shuddering. I know, I said quietly. I saw them too. That's when the radio suddenly turned on by itself. Static filled the car, making us both jump. I reached to turn it off, but before I could, voices started coming through the static. Not a radio station. These were desperate, frightened voices. Help us. Don't stop. They won't let us leave. It's been years. The voices overlapped, some louder than others, some barely audible beneath the static. Claire grabbed my arm again, her nails digging into my skin. "Turn it off," she cried. I tried, but the knob wouldn't budge. I tried changing stations, but every frequency was the same, static, and those terrible, pleading voices. One came through clearer than the others. "They're following you. Don't stop driving until morning." Then, as suddenly as it had started, the radio went silent and turned itself off. The only sound was the rain on the roof and our panicked breathing. We drove like that for nearly 40 minutes, both of us too scared to speak. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, I expected to see those shadow things on the road behind us. The rain eventually let up, and we started to see signs of civilization. Billboards, exit signs, other cars on the road. When we reached the next town, I pulled into the first gas station I saw. A brightly lit place with several other cars parked outside. Neither of us moved to get out. "What were those things?" I finally asked. Claire shook her head. "I don't know, but I think they might be what happened to those missing people the old man mentioned." "You think those were people? Former people?" The idea made my skin crawl. "Or what's left of them," she whispered. "They've been trying to warn others. That's what the voices on the radio were." We sat there for a long time, processing what had happened. Eventually, we went inside the gas station. The fluorescent lights and normalcy of people buying snacks and gas felt surreal after what we'd just experienced. We called for a tow truck for Claire's car, though I tried to convince her to just leave it. She refused, said she couldn't afford to lose it. I ended up getting a room at a motel nearby and letting Claire use the shower to clean up. We exchanged numbers before the tow truck took her back to her car the next morning. She texted me later that day saying her car started right up, no issues at all, like it had never broken down in the first place. It's been 3 weeks now, and I still can't shake the feeling that something followed us from that rest stop. Sometimes my radio will turn on by itself, just for a second, with nothing but static. And twice now, I've woken up in the middle of the night with the certainty that someone, or something, is standing in the corner of my bedroom, watching me with those glowing green eyes. I've tried researching those disappearances the old man mentioned, but I can't find any official records. It's like they never happened, or someone erased them. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I don't know if anyone will believe this. I'm not sure I would if I hadn't lived through it. But if you're ever driving along Route 66 and see an unmarked rest area surrounded by woods, especially as the sun is setting, keep driving. Don't stop. Because whatever is waiting there in the shadows isn't something any of us were meant to encounter. And I have a feeling that next time I might not be lucky enough to escape. Story 18. Mo. I never thought I'd be writing about this, but I need to get it off my chest. What happened at Riverside Apartments still gives me nightmares, and maybe sharing this will help me process it all. Back in March 2020, I was pretty excited to move into Riverside Apartments in Portland. I was in my junior year at Portland State, and the place seemed perfect. Close to campus, affordable, for Portland anyway. and had this cool industrial vibe. The building used to be some kind of warehouse that got converted into student apartments in the early 2000s. They kept a lot of the original features: exposed brick, big windows, and these massive metal ventilation ducts running across the ceiling. The first few days were normal enough. I was getting settled in, figuring out my commute to campus, and just trying to make the place feel like home. I remember unpacking my last box and feeling pretty good about my decision to move there. Then around day 5, I noticed something weird. I was studying late, maybe around midnight, when I heard my neighbor's TV through the wall. That wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that I could hear it more clearly through the air vent than through the wall. The sound carried really well through those old ducts. I didn't think much of it then, just figured it was part of living in a converted building. By the end of the first week, I realized I could hear a lot through those vents. Conversations, music, cooking sounds, all muffled, but definitely there. It was kind of annoying, but also just seemed like one of those things you deal with in apartment living. I bought earplugs and tried to ignore it. Then during my 3rd week there, I started hearing something that I couldn't explain away. It was a man's voice coming through the vents between 2 and 4 in the morning. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor who kept weird hours, but this was different. The voice was soft, almost like a whisper, but had this conversational tone to it, like someone was talking to themselves, but with purpose. The first night I heard it, I just pulled my pillow over my head and tried to go back to sleep. The second night, I sat up in bed and tried to make out what he was saying, but it was too muffled. Just the cadence of speech, rising and falling like normal conversation, but I couldn't catch the words. By the 5th night of this, I was getting seriously creeped out. The voice always came from the same direction, from the vent near my bathroom, and it always happened between 2 and 4 a.m., like clockwork. The consistency was what really started to freak me out. One morning, after a particularly bad night of barely sleeping because of the voice, I ran into my next-door neighbor in the hallway. Her name was Tara, and she seemed nice enough, so I worked up the courage to ask her, "Hey, this might sound weird, but have you heard any strange noises coming through the vents at night?" She looked at me for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, actually. I thought it was just the building settling or something, but sometimes it sounds like someone talking." That confirmation sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just me. Over the next few days, I asked a few other residents. Some had heard similar things, but brushed it off. Others hadn't noticed anything at all. One guy on the first floor laughed and said, "Welcome to Riverside, where the walls have ears." I wasn't satisfied with just accepting it as a quirk of the building. The voice was disrupting my sleep, and honestly, it was starting to scare me. So I decided to try to record it. That night, I set up my phone near the vent and left it recording while I tried to sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound again. This time, instead of hiding under my pillow, I got up and carefully approached the vent. The voice was clearer when I was right next to it, but still not clear enough to make out specific words. The next morning, I checked the recording. There it was, faint, but definitely there. A male voice speaking in a low, steady tone. I couldn't make out most of what was being said, but at one point, it sounded like he said schedule and routine. That made my skin crawl. It sounded like he was talking about someone. I decided to do some research on the building. The Riverside Apartments website had some basic history about the conversion from warehouse to residential, but not much detail. So I went to the management office and asked if they had any information about the building's layout. specifically the ventilation system. The property manager, a tired-looking guy named Mark, seemed annoyed by my questions, but eventually pulled out some old blueprints. What I saw made my stomach drop. The ventilation system was way more extensive than I'd imagined. The ducts didn't just connect apartments, they formed a network throughout the entire building, including basement areas, storage rooms, and mechanical spaces that weren't part of the residential conversion. "Have there been any issues with the ventilation system?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mark sighed. "Look, it's an old system. We've had complaints about noise, temperature regulation, that kind of thing. Nothing major." "What about unauthorized access? To the mechanical areas, I mean." That got his attention. "Why do you ask?" I hesitated, not wanting to sound paranoid. "Just curious about building security." He stared at me for a moment. "Those areas are locked, maintenance only." But the way he said it made me think there might have been problems before. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about those hidden spaces in the building. I started noticing other things too. My bathroom towel wasn't hanging exactly where I'd left it. A coffee mug was in a different cabinet. My laptop had been moved slightly on my desk. Each individual thing could be explained away. Maybe I was forgetful, stressed from school, not paying attention. But together, along with the voice, it was becoming a pattern I couldn't ignore. I decided to investigate the basement myself. I know that sounds stupid now, but at the time, I just wanted answers. The basement was accessible by a stairwell at the end of my hallway. The door wasn't locked, which surprised me. The basement was dimly lit, with concrete floors and exposed pipes overhead. It smelled musty and damp. I followed the main corridor, passing storage cages filled with residents' extra belongings. At the end of the hallway was another door labeled HVAC Access, Authorized Personnel Only. I expected it to be locked, but when I tried the handle, it turned. The door was slightly ajar. My heart was pounding as I pushed it open. The room beyond was large, filled with machinery and ductwork. The main HVAC unit hummed loudly, but what made me freeze was what I saw in the corner. A makeshift living space, a sleeping bag on a foam pad, a small camp stove, several gallons of water, a backpack, books stacked neatly beside a battery-powered lamp. Someone was living here, in the mechanical room, in our building. I should have left immediately, called the police, done anything other than what I did next. But I was in shock, and morbid curiosity pushed me forward. Next to the sleeping bag was a notebook. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Page after page of observations. About us, the residents. 3A leaves for class at 8:15 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Returns around 2 p.m. 4C showers at night, always watches TV until midnight. 2B works from home, takes phone calls in kitchen, speaks Spanish to mother on Sundays. And then I saw my apartment number. 5B, new tenant, female, early 20s. Unpacked last box on Tuesday. Studies late, sleeps with window cracked open. Speaks to herself when stressed. Has noticed the sounds in the vents. I dropped the notebook like it had burned me. This person knew I'd heard them. They were watching me, watching all of us. As I backed away, my foot hit something. I looked down and saw a small box. It had spilled open when I kicked it, revealing its contents. Hair ties, earrings, a watch, a keychain with a university logo. Small items that wouldn't immediately be missed if they disappeared from someone's apartment. And then I saw the camera. A small digital camera half hidden under the sleeping bag. I didn't touch it, but I could see the preview screen was on. The image displayed made my blood run cold. It was a photo taken through what looked like a vent grate. of someone's bedroom, someone's private space. I ran. I ran back through the basement, up the stairs, and straight to my apartment. With shaking hands, I called the police. The next few hours were a blur. Police officers swarming the building, residents gathered in the lobby, confused and frightened. The discovery that the person had been accessing the building through an unmonitored maintenance entrance on the side of the building. The revelation that they had been living there for approximately 6 months, moving between different mechanical spaces to avoid detection. They never caught the person. By the time police arrived, they were gone. But they left behind evidence of how thoroughly they had violated our privacy. The notebook contained information on almost every resident. The camera had photos taken through vent openings, people sleeping, changing, going about their private lives with no idea they were being watched. The building management scrambled to address the security failures. They sealed off unauthorized access points, installed monitoring equipment, changed locks. But it was too late for me and many others. I moved out the following week. I couldn't stay there knowing someone had been watching me, learning my routines, possibly entering my apartment when I wasn't home. It's been years now, but I still check the vents in any new place I live. I still wake up sometimes at 3 in the morning, thinking I hear that voice. That soft, conversational voice talking about someone's routine, someone's schedule, talking about me. I never found out who it was or why they were doing it. But sometimes I wonder if they found another building, another ventilation system, another group of unsuspecting residents to watch and catalog. And that thought keeps me up at night more than anything else.